5:30, we'll call the meeting to order. Item 2, Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 3, Agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the...
So moved.
Oh, we need to amend the agenda because we will have executive session tonight for items 1-25-2.1, which is personnel, or that's personnel, and 1-25-2.4, which is negotiations. So now do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to add executive session with personnel SDCL-1-25-2.1 and negotiations SDCL-1-25-2.4 and approve the agenda with that amendment.
Brian with the motion. Tim with the second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 4, consent agenda. Do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda in its entirety? So we have a motion from Terry. Do we have a second?
Second.
So second from Tim. Any discussion? Tom. I'm looking over here from Tom, sorry. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 5, open forum. Open forum is an opportunity for patrons to share their thoughts and concerns. The school board will listen, but no discussion will take place and there will not be board action. Board members may ask clarifying questions. The protocol established for open forum is to provide a time limit of 3 minutes to share concerns. If a patron would like to have a two-way discussion, they are encouraged to schedule a meeting with the superintendent. Appropriate and respectful public decorum is expected. Any complaints about school employees should refer to the board policy KL, complaint against school employee. Tanya, do we have anyone for open forum?
Organic.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Joe Urbanic. I live south of Fairpoint, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Atoll School. It's on the agenda tonight. Historically, when the school board has closed the school, the land and the school itself reverts back to the landowner. Whether it was the Hope School, Stoneville, Metagoshi, there's been a pile of them throughout the years. That's the way the school board's always handled it. I'm not telling you what to do, but if you go and surplus that, auction it off, as a community member, I think you guys would probably be on the hook to reclaim that site, to mitigate all the concrete, septic, cistern, and really get that site back the way it is. I'd hate to see the school yank the building off and then leave a mess for the rest of the community. So I just wanted to say that. Tonight I've been speaking with Mr. Wormstad here a little bit on it, so that's it. If there's any other questions, I can take them. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Terry Berry.
Hi, my name is Terry Berry. I have been an employee of the district for 43 years now. I am currently at the Atoll School as a para. I also wanted to come talk when I saw that, and I just saw it this afternoon. So I know that, well, first of all, I was thinking I don't understand why they would want to get rid of that school when they know that it's in the works to make a deal with Faith that possibly part of the rural schools and land would go to the Faith district. And if they possibly wanted to reopen that school, because there are still 3 families that are quite a ways to the north that might someday, if Faith decided to reopen that, if you lose a family who is currently there to homeschool again, that's a big chunk of money, and all those families to the north who will start there in a few years, that if the Faith District decided that that would be a lot of money for them, they could use that and reopen that school. And then the other thing is, I was at the meeting several years after the Hope School was closed when they were trying to decide what to do with it. And I understood at that night that it was either policy or that there was a law that they would have to reclaim that. And when they decided they would have to get rid of that basement and fill it in and take care of all the concrete slab for the basketball and do all those things, and they said that would be way more than they could get from that building, and so they just gave that building back to the landowners because of the cost. It was cost prohibitive to sell that building for, who knows what they would get out of it if they did it with sealed bids, and the cost of reclaiming was just way too much. So I wanted you to be aware of that before you went ahead and, just voted to get rid of that building and then be on the hook for a big amount of money to reclaim that spot. So that's all I wanted to say.
That is all.
Item 6, recognitions. 6A is character education word of the month. The character education word of the month for April is honesty, which involves being sincere, telling the truth, keeping one's word, and trustworthiness. Item 7, presentations. 7A, food service annual update. Food service director Rhonda Ramsdale will provide a brief annual update.
Thank you. Good evening. Here we go.
Hey Beth, would you give them the lights on both ends? It shows up the better.
Okay, I want to start with giving you a brief update on how it's going this year, the goals that we've had. Can I have next slide, please? Okay. So this graphic that you see here is on my office wall and has been all year. This is where my leadership team meets, and so we discuss these goals often. And so I wanted to let you know how that's going. As you know, last year, our biggest goal is to rebuild our fund balance, which it will be again this year, and I'll let you know how that's going. But to that end, our first goal was to look through our staff and have fewer staff positions, but better trained and better paid staff. So what we did was we ended up with 6 positions that we lost by attrition. We did not rehire for those positions. And so with the money we saved, we put into effect our Tier 2 program, which is a mentoring program for those that want to learn more and earn more. So this mentoring program covers everything we do, from menu planning all the way to service to inventory, everything, every aspect of what we do. So the people that joined this program, we had 13 sign up for it this year. The people that joined it took on a big task of learning all these modules. They also have to achieve a 95% attendance rate, and they have to be ServSafe certified. So 10 people graduated from that this year. Now, granted, most of these were our managers, and they were already well on their way. But they are all now able to go work in different buildings for us and to step into any position in the district. And so we have a lot better trained staff now, so we're really happy with that program. Our attendance bonus, we had 22 people achieve that this last year, and they get a $500 bonus for that. So menu changes, we really went through our menu. We wanted to find the things the students really loved and cut out a lot of the other things that were just superfluous. So we did that. We went through and we found the best quality things. We've been really working more and more on scratch cooking, which is something we've been working on for several years. But we're trying to find and to develop scratch items that kids really like. So we're still working on that. We're making progress. And also working on our Never Say No initiative, which is our service initiative, and just working on keeping the customers that we have now. And then our third goal was having more customers. So we develop staff menus, continue to develop that to increase our adult participation. We've done much more catering in district, and our a la carte sales are through the roof. When we start looking at numbers, you'll see that we are really overshooting our budget this year on a la carte, adult sales, and catering. So next slide, please. Okay, our free and reduced rate for this year is 29.37%. That's just a little bit off, a little bit lower than last year. We've been kind of steadily declining a few points a year since COVID. Prior to that, we were about 32%. This is in spite of bringing in way more applications than we did prior to COVID. So, but most of the schools are down a little bit. Stage Barn is one that's surprisingly up. That was about 24% last year. Now it's at 27.5%. And Whitewood is a little bit up also over last year. Other than that, not a lot of change. Okay, so our challenges this year. The first one is meal debt, of course, which is our challenge every year. I did this slide last week. Now, as of the end of the day, today our meal debt is about $36,900. So a lot of that we will collect before the end of the year because we really will go gung-ho on collection now until the end of the year. We still have about $20,000 in our angel fund that we will use for matching funds. So we'll be able to offer 75% matching funds. And hopefully we can collect a lot of those funds by the end of the year. And then our next challenge has been our low fund balance. We have struggled with this since last year. But the good news is that we're not off as far as we could have been, and we haven't had to borrow money from the school board yet, except for the one thing you'll hear about later. But that's
for later.
nothing we could have planned. Yeah, it's an anomaly. Nothing we could have planned for. So, but you see our fund balance is off by about $20,000 since the beginning of the school year. But one thing I want to point out to you, we're working on a report right now that I'm not prepared to show you yet because we're still working the bugs out of it, but it's one that will show us which buildings have more, we're calling it a profit and loss for lack of a better term, but it's really more of a surplus and loss. It shows us which buildings are performing better than others fiscally. But one thing that showed us is that we are running a surplus for this year of about $36,400 as of end of March. So you look at our meal debt and it's $36,900. So that meal debt is really represents all of our profit for this year so far. So it's really a big deal to us to get that collected. But just know we are making progress. So we're excited about that. Food prices have gone up a little bit. We may even go a little bit over budget yet on our food prices this year. I was just looking today and we're on target to be, we might be 5% over this year. But the commodities that we get a commodity entitlement every year. And the last 2 years, it's been about $130,000. And that's what it'll be for this next year as well. That is not going up. But the prices are going up. So when we buy proteins with our commodity dollars, we get less and less every year. So that has really been a challenge for us because then we have to use cash money to buy the food that we still need that's not being covered now by our commodity dollars. So next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick ad. We did start making gift cards this year, and we introduced those about Christmas time. So a lot of several of our principals and several of our department heads purchased these gift cards for their staff for Christmas gifts. So that's the only ad in my whole presentation, but I just want you to know we have that available. So our revenues, you can see there our sales to pupils. We're on track this year with a $725,000 budget to go over that by about 5%. So we set it for this next year at about $805,000. That is based on a price increase that you see there. Breakfast K through 8, we've held breakfast K through 12 to $2 for years. And so now it is time to make a more realistic breakfast price there. So we want to go to $2.25 for K through 8 and $2.50 for 9 through 12. And then with lunch prices, we are right now at $3.65 and $3.95. And so we're asking for a 35-cent increase on lunch as well. That will bring us into a more reasonable place on our prices and hopefully cover our costs more effectively so that we aren't as dependent on the general fund next year as we might otherwise be. Our sales to adults, we will overshoot that a little bit this year, so we're budgeting $30,000 for next year. A la carte sales, that has been unbelievable. We added a la carte to the middle schools, and they are doing, each of them is doing $4,000 or $5,000 a month. So that's a lot of money that we didn't have coming in before, and the kids love it. So we'll continue that. We're looking at about $115,000 this coming year, just in a la carte sales. And then our other sales,
Rhonda, just explain the difference between what a la carte sales are and your normal sales.
okay. Our normal sales, or what you would call that, would be breakfast and lunch reimbursable meals. And those would be a 1 meal per student per day. Those are the ones that we submit for claims. And we get reimbursements for all of those in different amounts depending on the eligibility. A la carte sales are basically anything that students buy that is not a reimbursable meal. So if they buy seconds, or they buy a cookie, or they buy a bottle of water, that's all a la carte sales. So we have a lot of kids that love to get seconds, and now we're able to provide that as well. So, okay. And then other sales includes the co-op, Black Hills Special Services. We do still provide meals for them every day. And so that money goes in there, also catering. So again, we're increasing that considerably to $35,000 this next year.
Would you give some examples of the catering you do?
The catering we have done parent-teacher conferences. It was one of the most recent ones. We will be doing the Department of Education field trip or road trip coming up this month. We did, in December, we did the legislative dinner. And we do all of that, plus we do subs for buses for the basketball team. We'll be doing a track coming up in May. The South Dakota, it's a big track meet, South Dakota. Yeah, that. Yeah, so we'll be doing 175 sack lunches for that. So these kind of things, and it's all just within the school. These are things we would have had to purchase somewhere. Somebody'd be making sandwiches somewhere, so it may as well be us, and so we're glad to be able to do it. Next slide. So that gets a little small. I apologize for that. So we're on to the reimbursements now. This is what we get from the federal government for each meal served. So for school lunch, 567 for this year, 577 for next year. We don't expect a big increase there. I ran that off of what we expect to be our participation for next year and a 1% increase in reimbursements, which is pretty conservative, but we lately have been expecting not much from the government. So I just figured 1%, and I hope that they do better than that for us. Hope they surprise us. Reimbursement rates will not be out until June, so I really won't have a final number there until then. Okay, school breakfast, same story. We don't expect a whole lot of increase there. And then our after-school programs probably will drop a little bit. And then the milk program, we haven't had that in the budget yet, but that's what we do in the rural schools. We send milk out there, and the reimbursements we get for that, total only about $600 a year, but it's $600 we didn't have. So, okay, and next. So this last final item, I hope we don't need this, but this is a possibility of my coming to you and asking for a transfer in from the general fund. And the reason for this would be, you saw that our fund balance was only in the 60,000-ish range. That's less than half of our monthly expenditures. Our monthly expenditures are 15 to 1,700 or what?
Our monthly expenses are about $150,000 to $160,000 a month in food
Yes.
service. So if you take that times like 20 operating days, it'll give you what our daily cost is to run food service on a monthly basis. So
Right, sorry, I couldn't spit it out. I
It's
kept trying
okay.
to say
I was a little slow
1,500
coming
and
to
I'm
your
like, that's
rescue.
wrong. Okay. So, I just want this to be, on your table because it probably will be in your, general fund budget. And I want you to know why, just in case we run short one month and we do need to be, we need your help, then we're gonna ask for it. My hope is we don't need your help. And I am very optimistic always, and so that's my story. Next slide, please. Okay, expenditures. So I put these two on one slide. This is classified staff. So all of this is our staffing, which is our biggest expense, of course. So the first line is our administrative line item for staff, and the next one is our operations line item. And the reason you have both of these lines on one slide is because we are moving our assistant director, Lori Lorius's salary to the administrative side rather than the operations side. So that's what you see here reflected. But when you look at the totals, not a lot of difference there. 636 altogether for this year, and we will come in under that budget. Because we've had some people leave since we budgeted that and we did not replace them. So my team's been working really hard this year, and I want you to know that working this much shorter this year than last year has been a real challenge for them, but they've really stepped up to the plate and they've gotten the training they needed to do the job, and they have done it. They've done it well. So hopefully most of the schools don't even realize we're shorter staffed than we were last year. So, but we're still looking at some more cuts for this year. I think 626,109 is a pretty reasonable number for this coming year for staffing. That represents a 1.5% salary increase. Whatever you guys do for the rest of the schools, we will do for our staff. And that includes right now having 27 positions, 21 of which are full-time. Next. So our cost of sales, again, food costs, I talked a little bit about this, that they just keep going up. We budgeted 550. We may come in just a little bit high this year on that. So we went about 570 for next year. But the reason we're not going up as much as you might think that we should be is because of our scratch cooking. As we train these people, they're learning more and more about scratch cooking. And the more we can do of that, the less the food costs. Of course, you have a little more labor cost with it, but less food costs. So, and then our consistent and careful use of commodity items. So we get most of our proteins with commodity dollars. We also get a large part of our fresh produce through the Favors program, which is commodity dollars as well. And then we do very little anymore on brown box, but we do some fruit and things like that. And brown box is what we get through the state warehouse, the things we order with commodity dollars through the state. All right, new regulations. So we've been in the news a little bit this year. The Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act is the first thing that came through and was signed on the president's desk. That allows whole milk, 1%, 2% milk to be served in schools rather than just low fat and 1% milk. So we would appreciate your input on that. We are looking at what the nutritionals will do with whole milk or 1% milk, and so we would probably do one or the other, or maybe both for white milk. The chocolate milk kind of has to stay skim milk because the nutritionals on that would be very difficult to work into our system. So. But at least the white milk will be able to have a little more fat, which is healthier, I think, for kids. And hopefully it will be more well received by them, too. So the new dietary guidelines for Americans that really stress proteins, and then fruits and vegetables, and then grains. So we don't know yet what that's going to look like by the time it washes through the USDA. They have their process, and it will actually take a few years before that comes through. But we are right now looking again at proteins. How can we increase proteins for the students without increasing costs too much? And that will be a challenge. But any rules for that will be a couple years down the road right now. I don't see anything happening real soon with that. And then on the state level, the school food law, HB 1082, was passed this year during the session. This covers the cost of reduced meals, reduced lunch and reduced breakfast. So this pays the 40 cents copay for lunch or the 30-cent copay for breakfast for students who qualify for reduced meals. This will amount to about $15,750 for us annually, but it won't make much difference in our budget because right now, those students that qualify for reduced, those families are able to pay. We only have about $1,000 in balances owing for students that have free and reduced meals. And those are balances that were accrued before they qualified. So we'll be able to pay those off with our donated funds at the end of the year. And so we won't see a change in the budget for that. That'll just be another claim to file and money coming from the state rather than from families. So I'm sure they'll be appreciative of that. Next slide. Okay, so our goals for this coming year, again, increase the fund balance. We've just got to get that to a reasonable level. And so we continue to work on that. We're making progress. But to do that, we're going to have to keep staffing lean for this year because that is our biggest expense. And we will have those price increases that I discussed with you for breakfast and lunch. We'll continue to focus on training for our staff so that I always tell them, I don't expect you just to work harder. I want you to work smarter. We want to get more efficient. We want to learn more scratch cooking. We want to learn how to do things in an efficient way rather than just working them like dogs. So, and they're doing a wonderful job. And then we need to continue our focus on a la carte and our in-district catering to keep those funds coming in. So next, and that is all I have. Do you have questions for me?
I've got a question from way back. The attendance bonus. So we've had that in play for 3 years. Can you tell us how you qualify for it? And then how effective has it been?
Okay. You qualify for
You,
that.
you don't have to give us data numbers, but just overall how effective.
Okay. So you qualify for that by achieving a 95% attendance rate. For most of our staff, that means they can miss 8 days of either sick time or leave without pay. Your personal days don't count, but sick days really do. And so what this has done is really decrease our sick days, our people calling in sick. So I can't give you data, but I'm glad you aren't asking for it. But just anecdotally, I see a big difference in our staff. We have a lot less absenteeism than we had before. I think it's been a very effective program. And people are really concerned about losing that bonus. They really count their days. They're very careful. So, yeah, that's been very good. Ryan?
So I'm assuming, so if kids, $30,000 in deficit, right, with fund balances, if a student has a negative fund balance, can they still get a seconds or order off a la carte? Is that?
They cannot.
Okay.
But they do get a reimbursable meal. And we try not to make it an obvious thing. We don't shame kids. In fact, we're more embarrassed to tell them than they are to hear it. Generally, they do know if they owe money. But one positive thing of that is some of the kids that are just barely going into the hole will quick go home and tell mom, or these days they text mom and she has money on electronically within 10 minutes and they're back to get the cookie. So, yeah.
What are some of the things you're making from scratch right now?
Our latest thing that we're working on is chicken noodle soup. And so kind of a funny story. We found out trying to make chicken noodle soup a few years ago that kids like it to look like Campbell's. Okay, so we decided to use spaghetti in it instead of the rotini or the penne that we were using before. So this time around, we decided to use ramen noodles. And so we made the soup according to the recipe with a few improvements. And then at the very end, we put in ramen noodles. Well, they expand like crazy and continue to suck everything up. They suck up all the broth in the soup. So it really just required a name change. So that now is a chicken noodle bowl. And we make a chicken noodle soup now with a rotini. And so now we're kind of going between to see which ones the kids like. So, but ramen is something we've really been working with this year, and the high school kids have been sharing their opinions freely with us, and that's wonderful. So I think that we are on track to get a really good ramen day for them, a good ramen bar. We've also, of course, we make chili, and we've made a bunch of salads. We make pasta salads, pasta and veggie salads, coleslaw. We make our own granola. We're just more and more all the time make our own ranch from scratch. Don't even use a mix now. It's all our own recipe, and the kids like it. So we've had a lot of successes in that area, and we'll just keep working on it. Okay, really?
Rhonda, you said you had 13 people go into your program and 10 graduates. How are the other 3 doing?
They're doing quite well. They just had a little further to go than the others. So some of them, several of them that are on that program just came into our district maybe in the last 2 years. And so they have a lot to learn about school food service regulations and meal patterns, those sorts of things. And that comes with time. So they're learning that. But in order to do that, they're going on field trips, and they're taking trainings with other districts and things like that. We share a lot of training with Rapid City, and they've helped our people a lot. So they will make it. It just...
Is there any incentive for that other than professional growth?
There is. There's a big pat on the back and a $2 raise. Yeah, so that is well worth it to them. And then also they get a little more of a spot at the table, during the planning, and when we're doing all this recipe development. That is something they really have fun with, but they get to do that when they're tier 2. They have the training to develop recipes, and so that's fun too. Any other questions?
Just like to say thank you for doing that. That's amazing. I love the idea of the scratch cooking. I think it's a good cost savings thing. It allows you guys to really participate in it and get the kids going on it. It's an awesome idea, and I super support it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You bet. Good job.
Anything else? Jim?
There we go. You've made me hungry.
Well,
Thank you for explaining that and all the work you do.
well, thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Seven B, preliminary budget review. Business Manager Brett Burdett will provide a brief overview of the preliminary budget.
Thank you, Justin. Just to piggyback on what Rhonda said, as she talked about her fund balance being down $63,000 at the end of March, we're projecting that to be somewhere around 55 to 65,000, depending upon how we fare through May and June. As we discuss this with the Finance Committee on Monday, we'll talk about what that looks like and the impact of the general fund. It'll be similar to what we're going to talk about here shortly in that transfer out from capital outlay to the general fund. It'll be up to an amount, but only if needed. So it's not like it's an automatic deal, but we know there's several months within the food service budget where they have a couple months in December and January. They don't have a lot of operating days. And so those are the months where they become a little bit more dependent upon cash flow. So we'll discuss this more Monday with the Finance Committee as well. What we want to talk about right now are the 3 governmental funds. All right, we've been beating on these for the last 6 months, and that is the general fund, capital outlay, and special education, okay? Today is just a snapshot of where we are right now with the decisions that you guys have made in terms of wages and benefits and budgets up to this point. Next month, we will bring a budget back to you in which we will go to the paper with and publish. So if you remember the timeline we sent out back in July and August, we've kind of tracked along there now. In April, we give a snapshot of what those budgets are looking like, what legislature has decided to do, and what the board has agreed to decide to do in terms of wages and benefits. So the first one we're going to look at is the general fund. We talk about the general fund, and what was decided at Pier was a 1.4% increase in state aid. Again, that's that target salary. We've gone over that formula multiple times and know the impact of that. The second variable in the general fund budget is enrollment. All right. This year's budget was 2948, and it was 3027, and we hit at 2948. Next year, we think that number is going to be lower, So we plugged in an enrollment of 2,900 for next September. That basically is a reduction of 48 students at $7,600 a whack. So whatever we realized in that 1.4% increase in state aid could be potentially eroded with the loss of the enrollment. Okay, so that's a big indicator there in the general fund revenue when we look at what does that budget look like. So the first column there are the revenue categories. The second one is our current fiscal year, and then what we're projecting out in 27. The next big thing, or the third thing they did in Pier, was a reduction of the owner-occupied mill levy. Okay, reduction of property taxes in Pier was the number one focal point. Okay, they did that by taking the owner-occupied levy and property taxes in the general fund and reduced it to 0.669 mils. Okay, the impact of that was a potential reduction in property taxes collected by the district of $1.6 million. All right, if we go down a little bit lower, again, county apportionment or fines and tickets at the weigh station, we get a share of those that come back to us in the form of county apportionment. State aid, all right? So if property taxes go down, we talked about the formula self-balancing, right? If we collect lower in property taxes, we get more in state aid or vice versa. Since our property taxes is down roughly 1.6, the formula brings our state aid up roughly 1.6 to meet that need. So we see a reduction in property taxes and increase of state aid if the revenue is there. Okay, if you remember where the source of revenue is, it's not a new source of revenue, it's the sunset of the sales tax. Okay, so if that's there, then that gets funded. If it's not there, there's a chance the Pier won't fund it. Okay, that's the big concern from people that are working with this formula, is that source of revenue is only going to be there in terms of decent sales record from the state of South Dakota. Does everybody understand that? So it's not a guaranteed source. All right. The next one is federal revenue, and basically we get Title I, Title II, and Title IV. We initially thought Title II and IV might be reduced, but due to some of the complexities of the federal budget in DC, there's one more allocation of Title II and Title IV, so that $229,000 was brought back in the budget. So we're only going to see a reduction in federal revenue next year of around $100,000. We have to align our expenditure to that because it's a reimbursable program. So we have to spend $1 to get $1 in those federal programs. The next one on there is transfer in. Okay, next year is the first year since about 2010. The district has agreed to put a transfer out of capital outlay into general fund of up to $450,000. The first $100,000 will go to pay to the early retirement incentive that you guys have been working on. The rest of that money, the rest of the $350,000 will be there if needed to get us through the year. Okay, so if enrollment is higher than 2,900, there's a chance we won't have to transfer that money. If it's lower than that, then we're going to have to come back to the board and ask them to move that money into the general fund from capital outlay. But the first process is to identify it in the budget, okay? So if you look at that, with that transfer and the reductions, we're not going to have to assign any fund balance. That's basically coming from capital outlay. Typically, before that, we've assigned fund balance to create a balanced budget. So really what we're looking at is not a whole lot of new money in the general fund next year if enrollment continues to decline, okay? Let's go to the expenditures, or the next slide. This just basically shows you that shift of funding, all right? Shows you the 3 years of local property taxes, shows you 3 years of county apportionment, 3 years of state aid, 3 years of federal money. Transfer in, you're going to see a first year there and a reduction of that fund balance on the last one. So again, you're seeing that shift of focus from property taxes to state aid as a bigger component of our general fund revenue. Next one, please. General fund expenditures. Again, if we look at the components of those expenditures, our largest expenditure we have is instructional. Then we go support staff, administrative, operational, transportation, co-curricular. This year we're looking at a budget of $25,500,000. That's after it's been amended once we adopted it. The budget we're proposing next year is $24,500,000. Okay, so there's a potential reduction of $1 million there in expenditures coming from the budget. Key components of this, so I want you to look at up under support staff and instructional. We're recognizing potential $500,000 savings in instructional. That's after we've limited those positions and we've added the wage and benefit package back in. So again, you guys have just got done with the negotiation with certified. We're working on admin and support staff. Most of those have been recognized in this budget. but we'll finish that up in the next 2 weeks, and that will be reflected in the May preliminary budget. The big reduction in support staff administration has the shifting of the property insurance premiums. Typically, that's been, not typically, but it has been a general fund expenditure for forever, okay? This year in Pierre, they said a school, because they can build and buy infrastructure and buildings in capital outlay, can now pay for the premium to insure that building in capital outlay. So we've shifted $505,000 as a general fund expense. It's now going to be proposed in capital outlay. The impact of the general fund, obviously, it makes your expenditures down to that $24,500,000. When we get to the next fund to look at what that does to your capital outlay budget, obviously it inversely impacts that budget by increasing it, right? So we'll talk about the impact of that shift over there. That's something you're going to have to decide on as a board if you want to continue to do that down the road, okay? I guarantee most schools are going to do that because they have more funds in capital outlay than they do in the general fund. That's something we're going to ask you to consider and support in the next month's budget, okay? So if we go down there, again, we're seeing those reductions. The biggest component we have is instructional expenditures, those things that are involved in the classroom. Again, the next one shows you 3 years. Oh, if you go back one more, please. So the second computation there is why did our operational expenditures go up $160,000? We looked for some savings there, but we received notice about 2 months ago that Black Hills Energy is going to the South Dakota PUC for a 26% increase in electrical rates, all right? They're not sure they're going to get 26, but that's what they're going to start with in August. So our bills in August will start to reflect a 26% increase from Black Hills Energy. 90% of our power comes from Black Hills Energy. We get a little bit from Grand Electric, and we get a little bit from West River Electric. Those rates we haven't heard anything about. Black Hills Energy will impact us by about $155,000 next year. If they get less than that, they tell us they're going to credit our bill, okay? So if we see those raises in August and it happens to be an 18%, we'll see some credits back on our bill, but we had to reflect that increase in our budget. So we spend roughly about $600,000 on electricity in the district. That's the impact of utilities on our budget. So again, what we save in other areas, we turn around, give back on some of these expenses we have little control over, okay? Transportation, again, we always reflect about 10 to 15% of the cost of our student transportation in capital outlay. We've done that for quite a while, and we'll continue to do that, all right? So, but you see our transportation costs 1.357 to 1.456. We knew it was going to go up. We've gone to a different carrier, all right? And that's costing us more, especially right now with the cost of diesel fuel. When we did this, we thought we were probably going to have a period where we could actually see some savings because we typically build in a fixed rate mile that they would build their rates on. But we got away from that because we would see the increase, we would see the cost of an increase, but we very seldom see the cost or the benefit of a decrease. So we went through to a direct build rate. So they billed us whatever that fuel was for the month. We thought, great, by the time we started doing this fuel, diesel fuel was about $3.30, $3.40. We finally got that done. Next thing you know, the conflict in Iran, fuels is where it's at. So we're not seeing the proposed savings of that at this point. Hopefully things will straighten out and that price of diesel will come back down before the start of school next fall. Co-curriculars is the budget's flat. We got some savings there, but we also saw some minor costs in co-curriculars. So we did see a little bit of savings there, but not a lot. Overall impact of the budget when we moved out that property premium into capital outlay was about $1 billion reduction in the budget. Okay, that was pretty big. You guys did a good job there, so well done. Any questions on that one? Okay, Tanya, let's go over to capital outlay. Well, those are just showing you kind of a 3-year comparison of where our expenditures are. So again, we spend a majority of our money on instructional expenditures, and a large portion of that is in salaries. Okay, so 80% of our budget is salaries and benefits. Go ahead and capital outlay. Capital outlay revenue. We're looking at this year, we projected to bring in about $6.8 million in property taxes. Our savings and some other investments earn around $130,000. E-rate is a program through the government where certain technology, you can get discounts on it. And so Christian and James have been working very hard to make sure that all our technology improvement, or at least those technology improvement, they're E-rate qualified, we're getting that discount. So we get about a 40% discount on network equipment and a lot of our internet services. So we realize that sometimes we get a project that we will bid it to where we just pay the 60%, or sometimes there'll be a project where we're not sure, it's a combination where it's 60% or 40% reimbursable and the rest of it's not. So we'll bid it out as full cost, and we see that rebate sometimes between 6 and 12 months. So we also have up there as a revenue code if we see that rebate come back in that fiscal period. The federal income we receive, again, this will be the last year of those interest credits we have on the 2010 should be qualified school construction bonds there. And then fund balance. We've been saving for this project down in Woodle Field, and that money sits in savings, so it'll be brought back. The second half of that will be brought back in next year's budget to finish that project. So we're looking at about an $800,000 increase in capital outlay revenue next year, solely on the back of property taxes at that point. Okay, so now we'll just look at kind of that capital outlay revenue in terms of a graph. Tanya? And again, we're going to see that go up. We're going to see the revenue come up from capital outlay. We're going to see our interest income go down. Depository rates are getting smaller. Our cash balances are getting smaller. And so we're seeing that impact. And then the rest of it is very minor in terms of a percent of our budget. So let's go on to capital expenditures. If we look at the budget this year compared to next year, we're showing roughly the same of instructional expenditures, and that's predominantly two things. It's new curriculum and it's technology in the classroom. Those things make up a predominant share of our instructional cost. The rest of them is instructional software. We're getting away from textbooks. You don't even buy a textbook anymore. You get a teacher book, and then you buy a subscription. You buy a license. So we're seeing a lot of that being expensed in capital outlay. And you used to be able to buy a textbook for 10 to 15 years. Now you're buying these renewals every year. So we're being put on the hook by a lot of these vendors in terms of what we're spending to provide those instructional materials for our staff. Support staff, we're seeing that go up a little bit. That's because we have that property premium buried in that particular category. So the only reason that's up is because of that $505,000 that was shifted over from the general fund. Again, these are expenditures that can be expensed in either one, all right? It's not that we're doing something here that the state says you can do it in the general fund, or you can do it in capital outlay, or you can just move all the money over and do it in one, all right? So by doing these, we identify those costs in our budget. So these are things that the state allows us to do, and that's how we're presenting them here. Operation and maintenance, we're seeing that go up. We've got a couple bigger projects we're looking at doing. Again, one of those is a one-time deal down in Woodle Field. Transportation cost, the only reason we're seeing that over 165 is to make the switch from Harlow's to Dakota Bus. It was recommended that we buy a software called TransFinder. It's a software that we can plot where our people or our students who ride the bus are located, and it helps the transportation carrier develop routes to become more efficient. That software also marries to the platform of
Infinite Campus.
Infinite Campus. So when all that information is put in there, they get together and they talk to each other about where our kids are at. That way the bus company can look at it. Currently right now, our current provider owns the rights to that software and is probably not going to be able to make available in the transition to the new one. So we're going to go ahead and ask the board to buy that, and that way it stays with the district.
And that means all the student data is with us, even though we have a release to eliminate all that student data from Harlow's. It allows it much more secure for us to have the license long term.
Co-curricular is down. That's because we bought a van for them last year, so their expenditures are down to where their average is over the 5-year course. Debt service is slowly going down. All right, we start to drop those principal payments down. In 2 years, that'll drop off considerably when some of those debts come off. Again, as we talked about with the Buildings and Grounds Committee, where we're looking at potential project 2 or 3 years at the high school, and we're trying to time that out to where that might be a possibility. Again, the transfer out, we're asking the board to authorize up to $450 if needed, okay? Contingency, we put $25,000 in there. That is included in the amount of expenditures you approve, but can only be authorized by your approval. So if we find something, we didn't budget enough for a computer or something like that, if Kristen or James comes and says they need 10 more computers that wasn't in the budget, we ask you your authorization to buy them and then move the money from contingency up into a computer line item without having to amend the whole budget. So that's kind of what contingency is. You're allowed about 5% in capital outlay, okay? Pretty simple budget. Next one. Special services revenue. Again, three forms: property taxes, state aid, and federal. All right. The concept is the same. Your budget is determined by need. Your need is determined by the number of children identified in the process. All right. Our child count goes up every year. I believe December 25 child count was about 551, up from the previous year. So we look at that. Our need goes up, and then once the need is determined, the combination of property taxes and state aid are calculated to determine which pays what percent of that. So as we look at that, the state allows you 2 mill levies. They allow you the lower mill levy, which makes you 100% vested in state aid. So as long as you request 1.249 mills, you'll get 100% of the state aid determined in the formula. If you go below that, the state lowers your state aid proportionally. Okay. The second levy there, or there was another levy, it's 1.449 mills, is what you can assess above and beyond. Okay, you can assess that, but your state aid doesn't go down. You just collect more property taxes. So what a district has to do is determine what's my need on the expenditure side and what's going to be collected if we assess these levies. And in the budget for next year, we're proposing the lower mill levy, just like we've done the last several years, of 1.249. Okay, how we do that is once we determine what our needs are for staffing and program, you can really do two things in special education. You can hire staff and you can provide instructional materials for them to teach the kids the skills they need, okay? You can do some placement services, but it's very, very limited on what you can do with special education money, and even more so with the federal money. And so what we do is we try to balance then the federal money where we have a good allocation of federal funds. And so there's always the challenge of making sure that your fund balance is adequate in the event you have some high placement cost kids you weren't expecting, but not to exceed that, so you're giving back state aid money. We're at the ability now this year that we're going to bring our fund balance down a couple percentages. Where I think we'll be able to utilize a larger percentage of the federal money next year than we did last year and this year. We left a couple $100,000 on the table last year. This year, I think we're in a position to collect the $700,000 that we submitted in the grant application, and proposing the same thing next year. So I think we're in a good position to utilize federal funds for our special education director and assistant director to do some good things next year. Okay. So that budget increased about 4.8% potentially in revenue. If we look at the expenditures, it's going to be less than what we're going to collect in revenue. So if we can go over there. Again, this just to say where's your money's coming from, all right? As you see the local effort go up, the state aid goes up. The federal depends upon where we're at in the budget and what we can do, all right? It's just, again, it's a visual picture of who pays the bill in special education, all right? If we look at expenditures in special education, you'll see instructional is the largest by far, okay? We're proposing to increase that budget to $5 million next year, and it's all staffing. When you look at our budget, it's primarily staffing. We got a little bit of instructional material, some workbooks and things like that, some programming, but it's all staffing. Support services, a majority of that is staffing, done through contracted services, okay? We have speech, psych, OT, PT in there, and some of those now we've hired, and so some of that staff is in there that is our own staff now because we have a big enough need to. Some of the staff is still shared with Black Hills Special Services Cooperative, and we do that through an MOU. So it's kind of a hybrid deal now that we're working with them. We have such a need in speech now and even in psych that I believe we're developing a couple of our own psychologists because they're so hard to hire. And we have probably 4 of our own speech pathologists on staff where we used to contract all of them. That's how big a demand we have. When we talk about that IEP number, those kids, those child count numbers, that 551, that's what's dictating where these services come from. Administration cost just uptick. That's probably the 1.25 that's going to be in that salary and benefit package. Student transportation, periodically we have students that we have to take somewhere or can't get here. We have to provide those services. So we always put some money in there for typically fuel and things like that. Another special education cost are those things that come up that we don't know about. So there's some in there that are tied to the individual IEP that are very difficult to budget for until the actual IEP is conducted. So those are historical costs we bring forward in the budget every year. So we're showing only about a 1.5% increase. So which tells us that on the revenue side, we might have the ability to tweak that levy a little bit, or make sure we're visiting with Mrs. Peterson and we have all the costs reflected in this budget that she's going to need next year. So again, this isn't a completed budget, but we're probably at the 2/3 or the 80% in terms of completion. Next one, Tanya. Again, it just shows you where all the dollars in special education go to those instructional expenditures over the last couple of years. We go to the next one. Conclusion, right? General fund is going to be ongoing to align our cost to ongoing revenue. And that ongoing revenue is state aid and enrollment. Okay, those are the two variables we'll be looking at. Capital outlay, future levy. Right? We're talking about that all the time with the Finance Committee and the Buildings and Grounds Committee. What do you guys want as a board to see in terms of your facilities and programming that can be tied to capital outlay? And what is it going to take to fund those? All right, we just threw a challenge to the Finance Committee in terms of a $500,000 premium that just got dumped in capital outlay. Okay, our current capital outlay budget before that had a surplus of about $575,600, and we identified 3 or 4 areas that the district would like to save for future purposes. That was pretty much eroded. Okay, now we're down to about $180,000 projected surplus in that capital outlay budget. So the Finance Committee's got to go back to work on Monday and kind of tweak our plans a little bit on what's going on. Okay, same with the Insurance Committee when we look at that one. We were talking about potentially self-insuring some buildings and needing some funds to do that. Well, now we might have the ability to carry a few of those premiums over in capital outlay, but still take a look at trying to find some savings in there to increase that surplus in capital outlay. Those are all decisions that the board and the committee will be making in the next 60 days. In special services is truly, there's this good, strong fund balance. We have good federal funds on reserve. The nice thing about the federal funds we have is there's no carryover limit. We've been carrying over somewhere between $700,000 to $800,000 annually the last few years. The problem is it's the personnel available to hire is extremely difficult and extremely competitive. Okay, everybody's vying for a very small number of graduates coming out of post-secondary institutions anymore to come to work in the field of special education. So it's trying to find the people to hire. Questions for me?
Yeah, Brett, I'd like to know where are we finding the cost savings on the support services
The general
from
fund?
26 to 27?
We go
Special services
Special services?
expenditures.
We haven't finished the contract with Black Hills Special Services yet to see what that's going to be. So when I visited with Miranda to get an update on the personnel services, Tom's, it's just there could be some personnel missing in there.
And
Transitioned over to us.
Transitioned over.
So they're no longer their employees come to us, and now they're our employees. So they wouldn't have the contract that they'd be up above on there.
so we're still accounting for them in some other budgetary line. Just
Yep. We're looking to hire the same number of staff we have and actually increase slightly in special
So
education.
there's a couple of personnel that are reflected up in the instructional because that's where their degrees are at right now. And they're not down in the psych services at this point. Once they become certified or licensed psychologists, that will be reflected down into that as well. So we're continuing to work with Chrissy and Melissa on the personnel they have right now in that budget, Tom, and what they're projected to do. And it could be just some missing personnel in that point.
So example, we grew our own in school psych. So we have somebody who'll be interning in the following year. They'll go from the top line to the second line. We also have 2 staff members who are going for their behavior analyst degrees, and they'll move from the top line to the second line on that as they move forward. So we're doing a lot of growing our own there from their regular teaching into more special services support areas.
You talked too long, Brett. My mouse died. Thank you, Brett. Item 8, action items. 8A, authorized issuance of teacher contracts. The district is requesting to issue teacher contracts for the 26-27 school year under the proposed 25-26 terms of the MEA negotiated agreement. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Megan with the motion.
second.
Terry with the second. Any discussion?
So will take place. This is off our current contract. We are currently finalizing negotiations. There's a tentative agreement that the MEA group is looking at finalizing. When that's finalized, we'll then have to reissue contracts off the new 26-27 contract. But legally, you have to issue contracts by April 15th. So that's what we'll be doing. They'll have a 2-week turnaround to turn those contracts back in.
Two things. First, I'm going to abstain from this vote. And number two, what was it? Is there a delay this year in getting the new language done with negotiators? I'm just curious. So it was just schedule-wise, it didn't work out.
I think part of the timing when we make sure everything went through because it was such a interesting year at the legislature. Second thing is, as we look at some language items, we're going to have an MOU, if they agree to work on that through about July, and that's on clarifying our reduction in force language. Our reduction in force language is very, very vague. And so we want to make sure, we don't want to change it, we just want to make sure it's very clear so the average first-year teacher or school board member, first time they read it, they understand exactly what it means and what's the process for that. It's a little unclear, to say the least, the process we have, so we're trying to update that. And that would come at a different time with an MOU if MEA agrees to do that. We're currently actually working on some of the language right now.
And it's not uncommon in education to see where you get last year's contract, and then as a new one comes out, you're awarded that new one. Hearing no more discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8B, ASBSD Protective Trust Health Insurance Renewal for 2026-27. The Meade School District has received a 12% increase in its health insurance renewal through ASBSD Protective Trust. Mr. Wormstead in Business Office met with both the Employee Insurance Committees and the School Board Insurance Committee and are requesting to make no changes to the plan offerings for the 26-27 school year. Plans to continue offering Plan 3, 2,000, 4,000 PPO, Plan 5, 3750, 7500 HSA, Plan 7, 5250, 105 HSA. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Megan with the motion. Tim with the second. All right, time for discussion.
So this is an annual routine and renewal of our insurance premium with this. This year is 12%, which is at the Associated School Boards. There's 5 tranches. There was 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. We're at the highest level for that, for our premium increase. And because we're in the pool, if we were self-insured, we'd be looking at about a 30 to 40% increase on that because the pool's able to help us cost saving that.
Where are we at in relation to other districts in the area, maybe around the state, like our actual premiums currently?
Our premiums are lower than 2 neighboring AA districts still at this point. I can't remember what year it was, but years ago when the Meade School District went into the pool, they had 3 or 4 outstanding years in health insurance, so we came in at a very, very low premium rate, in fact, exceptionally low with that. And so our spend is more than our premiums every year right now. So more than likely, like with last year and for the next few years, we'll be at the level 5 tranche, I call it, the highest rate. But because the pool is able to mitigate those costs across that, that's us catching up to the average. Right now, our insurance rates are a little bit below average, still with the 12% increase compared to some of our peers our size, such as Huron and Spearfish and other AA schools that I compare ourselves to. Currently in the negotiation with the MEA group, waiting for that final agreement to be approved.
So just to give you guys some insight, the employer that I work for also seen something similar to this, and their choice to move forward was the best option we had was to remove spouses off that insurance cover. So it only covered the employee and their kids, which left a lot of people figuring out how they were going to provide health care for their spouse in a lot of those instances. So there's other options out there, but I think this one has worked well over the years and serves our staff.
Yep, we have a very good insurance plan and coverage for our people through the Associated School Boards. There are districts, as we're working on giving something for our insurance. There are districts that, because the state gave so little this year, are just moving raises, and the employees are having to eat the entire cost of all the insurance increase. We probably won't be able to cover the whole insurance increase, but we're trying to move some money towards that. It's probably not enough, but it's something with what we got from the state.
Do I need to abstain from this as well?
This is an overall, it's not direct targeted. This is health insurance for all employees, so I don't think you would have to. Because it's all employees. It doesn't matter if it's a paraprofessional or anybody else across the board. It's a universal expense. You'd be like saying you're buying a vehicle, your wife may or may not ride in it. It's tough to, when it's targeted in a negotiated agreement which your spouse is part of, then yes, it is a direct conflict.
I think last year we abstained though, Brian. So I think just to be safe, I will abstain.
I will as well.
So hearing no more discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8C, ASBSD Protective Trust Workers' Compensation Renewal for 26-27. The business office is requesting the board approve the participation in the ASBSD Protective Trust Workers' Compensation Pool for the 26-27 school year. Do we have a motion? Terry with the motion.
Second.
Tom with the second.
There you go. Good job.
I was just about to. Any discussion?
This one, the pool is in very good position. They typically buy down the increase every year with a contribution from internal. I think our rate per dollar of payroll is about 3.2 tenths of a cent per dollar of payroll. And so even though our rate went up a little bit because our payroll went up proportionally, total premium stayed about the same. So the pool's in very good shape, and every year they buy that back down. So when they come into it, so our increase is as minimal as possible, they contribute money internally from their fund to do that, and that's done through a board. I know Wayne sits on the health board. They also have a work comp advisory board, and that board every year recommends that to keep those premiums competitive in the pool, they buy that back down too. So we're in good shape, workers' comp.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8D, 1-year waiver to school board policy, JECB, open enrollment limits. An increase to the open enrollment cap by 1.5 per student, per section, per grade level due to the state funding or decreasing enrollment. This would apply for 1 year for the 26-27. We increased the open enrollment cap last year, 1 student per section. So what is being proposed now is kindergarten would go from 20 to 21 students, first grade 22 to 23 and a half, second grade 23 to 24 and a half, third grade from 24 to 25 and a half, fourth grade 25 to 26 and a half, fifth grade from 25 to 26 and a half, and grades 6 through 8, 26 to 27 and a half, and 9 through 12. Enrollment may not exceed attendance center building capacity. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Lee with motion.
Second.
Scotty with the second. Any discussion?
Does everybody remember how this works? So if, let's say, we're at Sturgis Elementary in second grade, and we're sitting in second grade, and we have 25 kids already in every section across that, or 24 and a half as an average, because you take 2 kids, it's an average on that. We don't accept any more open enrollment. That grade level at that building is closed for that. When I first got here, we had no limit, so all of a sudden some would be really spiked, some low, so this sets sort of that boundary. It's a little higher than we agreed to when we first put this policy in, but it is a mechanism. Last year, we probably gained about 11 students because of this with the open enrollment policy that we had. 9 to 11 students. So at $7,600 a student, that helped make that difference. Not very popular with your teaching staff, though. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not a popular decision to do this.
Just to clarify, the numbers that we're looking at here, for example, in kindergarten, the 20 is what our policy is at. Last year we approved to 21. This year it is a 21.5. So it is just half a student per section per grade level increase from last year.
Yep, correct. 1.5 over from the original policy.
Mm-hmm.
So our 4-section building for kindergarten would take an extra 2 students than original policy, which is about $15,000.
And just to be clear, that's when open enrollment shuts off. Not when more students can't come into that class. That's when open enrollment stops.
So what we did is when we put this policy in to slow down, to put caps on open enrollment, that means if 30 kids move into our district and 4 of those are in that second grade and we've already set the cap off, our class size in that second grade would actually go from 24.5, those 4 kids move it to 25.5 because we cannot reject students that reside within our district. It shuts off open enrollment, these numbers.
Do we have, sorry if I missed it, do we have a policy about max numbers?
Classroom
Before you have to hire another
No.
teacher, put another section in?
Usually what happens when it gets to a certain point, and we're looking at that in July, in the previous years, prior to this last year, we would actually come back and I'd come in July, or you give me permission in July to hire teachers as needed. That was really what we did on the growth curve. Okay. So I think my first year we hired an extra kindergarten teacher for Sturgis Elementary, and I think we might have hired a second grade teacher at Piedmont Valley.
And we couldn't find one, so we added a para.
We added a para.
Overload on one classroom.
Yep.
too.
That's what we did. So that's what we were doing when we had rapid growth. You gave me permission to try to find class size alignment. We do not have a class size policy.
To be clear, that's probably the way you prefer it. Because we won't know until like the time of.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
That's the way you'd prefer it, just leaving it as is and just adjusting as necessary, when necessary.
I think that's what you have to do now, because your issue is if you have a hard, fast policy on what that is for class size, it'd force you to hire a teacher. In those situations with declining enrollment, if that comes on the wrong side, you may not be in a position to afford that. When you have a healthier fund balance or a more steady funding stream than we're seeing from the state, then those are very common for that. Example, if we had a 2-year funding cycle, so you could plan out 2 years instead of find out in March what your allotment's going to be, and then truly find out what your funding is going to be in September, 5 weeks into school. Our system doesn't allow a lot of forward planning on that because you're reacting to the state funding versus a lot of schools do, or states do 2-year funding cycles. So you know what your funding cycle is going to be for 2 years, and you're funding your next fall off the previous year's enrollment, not 5 weeks into school. So you're playing a little catch up on that. So it makes it very difficult to have that hard set rule. You can, and some districts do have it.
I think the other thing that makes it difficult is some of our buildings that are fairly old, the classroom size is significantly smaller than some of our new builds, which will put restrictions on how many students will fit in those classrooms compared to, so if you look at like Sturgis Williams compared to Stage Barn, the classrooms are vastly different and can handle different quantities of students. So if you put a hard and fast rule, you'd have to set it at whatever your smallest classroom could handle rather than what you could handle in your buildings.
Wayne, can you tell us what the potential cost benefit would be for that extra 0.5 student? More realistically, like if, like based on previous, like what our possibility for growth in each grade?
Prior to last year, we'd have 6 to 8 different areas closed off to open enrollment because of capacity. And I think last year we were down to 3 that were closed to open enrollment. So we had about 5 different areas between buildings and grade levels that we actually had still room for students. So every student you take in, so if you have a 4-section building and a 0.5 is 2 more students, that's 15,000 for that grade level. The 1.5 is 6 students if you actually hit that from our previous policy, our original policy without the waiver. You know, you're at 6 students times that, you're $42,000 at that grade level that you allowed space for from open enrollment.
My concern is knowing that this is just the open enrollment cap. And, you know, for 4th grade, 5th grade, we're at almost 27. For grade 6 through 8, we're at almost 28. That concerns me a lot. Can you tell us, I know we've talked about it in the past, but it's not a number that is stuck in my head. Can you tell us what our grade levels were at this past year? Like what our class sizes, our average class sizes were?
In September, yeah. Give me just 1 second here. I can pull that up.
Thank you.
Brett, while you're looking this up, Wayne,
Yep.
is any of this built into our revenue side?
Class sizes?
Yeah.
It's built into his tracker for enrollment, Brian, as we look at that to try to determine what that aggregate amount is. So we really don't break it down by building, by class size. Really, it's looking at an aggregate number, but it's influenced obviously by buildings and by grade level, Brian. So, it comes down there.
So last year we only closed off Whitewood at 21 students. We closed off PVE, and that's in kindergarten, 21 students in kindergarten. Megan? Sorry. We closed off kindergarten last year at 21 students for open enrollment. We closed off first grade at PVE and third grade at PVE. Our average, the rest of my grid is 25.8 students or less per grade level. 8K through 8.
So that is what was actually
In August. I should actually double check a couple of things here, make sure I don't have an anomaly months. Sturgis Elementary was high as 23.2 in fourth grade. Next highest third grade at PVE was 23.75. Sturgis Williams, the middle school, the highest we saw was 25.6 for a month, I believe, and that was in 8th grade. Stage Barn, the highest we've seen is 25.5 in 8th grade.
okay. Thank you.
So Megan, I think he's saying those numbers with enrollment down, but we're cutting staff. So I feel like some of those base numbers are going to go up a little bit this next year. Am I crazy saying
Like
that?
fifth grade moving over will jump
Yeah.
Yep.
fifth grade numbers up.
So
Yep.
those numbers are predictive a little bit, but I think it's not capturing the entire reality of what
Yeah,
this
so
next year looks
We're
like.
looking at about 27.5 26 in 5th grade at Sturgis Williams, I believe, next year about. Is that correct? About 26 students, I think, next year in 5th grade. For that PVE, I can tell you that because I know it's 2nd grade. I'll change the section size estimate.
If we get to these numbers though, then
You're looking at
no
next.
more open enrollment.
Yep. So you're looking at next year, the reductions at Piedmont Valley, you're looking at 25.5 in 3rd grade, I think it is.
So then essentially in 3rd grade at Piedmont Valley, if it is at that 25.5, we will not have open enrollment. for
Yep.
that grade.
We'll actually read that out and close it off.
Okay.
Our kindergartens, we're getting our final numbers there for early enrollments, and then we'll have that coming up here in May and be able to look at where we're at.
And we had a bunch of open enrollments today on the consent agenda. So the open enrollments are rolling in right now.
Mhm.
What'll change that is in district. Any in district kid that comes in.
So when will we know our numbers to stop open enrollment?
We'll start tracking those starting now. Yep. Second open enrollment session is open, and before you prove anything in May, it'll be all based off of where those class sizes are, and we may have on my enrollment tracker sheet front page, I have 3 grade levels that are red from this last year.
Okay.
And we'll start that new system on this. We'll look at it, and if we have red cells, we just turn them off. They can't
And
accept
that's
open
with what we're,
whatever number you set tonight. It's what we'll use for that. Whether it's the official policy plus 1 or, as a motion says, 1.5.
Right now, we're looking at moving forward with the current proposal of what's on the screen.
Can I make an amendment or propose an amendment? Propose amendment to leave it at 1.0 like we did last year. This would be my amendment.
So now it goes back to Lee. But Lee can accept that.
Or you have another second, then you have to vote on the amendment before you vote on the final project. So
So
she's,
you can accept it.
I can
She can second it.
Makes the process easier.
Yep. Because it's a separate vote. It's not a friendly amendment to it. It's a second vote. So we vote on the amendment, which would change the original from 21.5 if it passes to, or 1.5 to 1 if it passes. So she seconded it, right?
I don't mind holding my second if we're gonna have a friendly amendment.
I just do the second. That way we have a separate vote. Separate vote.
All right, then I hold my second.
She's seconding it.
Tony, did you get that?
We have a
Brian
motion.
with a motion.
After we do this one, then we go back to the first vote. So what's on the floor right now is we have a motion by Mr. Voigt, seconded by Ms. Schneider, to go to 1.0, not the 1.5. It's an amendment to that original. So that's what's before you now for discussion and or vote.
So all in favor of going to the,
Oh,
hold on.
are we still in discussion?
Yeah,
Okay. Is there any reason why it has to be a blanket 0.5 or hold it at the 1, or could it stay at the 1 increase from last year for like 4th, 5th, and 6th grade? But go up so there's some compromise there in here too.
we
Does that make sense?
yeah, but we would have to vote on this amendment.
Mm-hmm.
It would have to fail and then make another amendment. But yeah, we need to talk about what those possible ideas are out there.
That's what discussion is here. So you have a good idea whether you're going to pass or not pass this amendment to the motion. Okay.
Brian, seconded by Megan.
Megan. Yeah, the amendment. Yeah, you can actually just amend your policy, not have the policy, withhold it for 1 year, and go back to what we used to do. And when we thought they're full, we stopped. That was
Wayne thought we were full.
I mean, it basically came down. It came down to the principal and superintendent discussion, and you've been operating for years with that, with fast growth that way.
Mm-hmm.
Which led to disparities between buildings. Why we put this in.
Right.
So that's a lot of amendment talk, but I think when you go back to the original concept here is we're trying to increase the amount of children per grade at either a 1.0 or 1.5%. We're doing that because we're trying to save money.
Well,
We can't really lose that focus, right?
Right, we're using it for open enrollment. So we're saying we're increasing the ability to have open enrollees come into our schools because right now enrollment's down overall. So that increase should help with the budget side of things.
Yeah,
If
I
that
think we
even-
need to keep that in focus.
if it even comes to happen. And on the flip side, like we've been discussing, you're talking about in-district enrollment on top of that. If those numbers come up, and like Wayne said, like we're doing open enrollment right now in kindergarten, if we set this at 21.5 students per class in kindergarten with open enrollment, and then we open up the enrollment for actual in-district, we could see 25 kids in a class in kindergarten potentially, which is really, really high.
But if this gets to a point where teachers cannot handle this, then we go to
Adding a staff member.
adding a staff member, which is a possibility. Yes, it takes more money,
Para, yeah.
or like you said, another para or some sort of assistance. So, I mean, even if we get too many kids, which obviously in the last year we haven't seen that problem, but if we do, we can hopefully have enough to afford another staff member.
Scotty brings up a valid point of like we could potentially look at this at a varying aspect, and I get what you're saying, Tom. We've been money focused on everything, but that K through 3 is a very developmental stage where we're already pushing K through 3 way beyond my comfort level. for very entry level developmental kids. If you want to make long-term growth in education, it's in that K through 3. You can handle more, and I've even talked with some of the principals that 4 or 5 and on, you can handle more students in those classrooms, but it's important to keep that K3 low as you can.
I know 12 years ago when I was teaching 7th grade English over in this building, I had 35 students in a classroom with no windows. Just FYI.
How did you like?
I mean, I had to go write on the whiteboard before the day started because I couldn't get to the whiteboard during the day. So,
And she left out they didn't have desks. It was just rows of chairs like we're set up out here, right?
well, I had desks, but
Yeah,
That was a
joking
joke.
comment. I'm gonna have to speak like I write my text message, sarcasm included.
We need to take a vote on the amended, which is the
1.
not the 1.5.
Moving it from 1.5 to 1, to change the original moment.
Blanket across all grade levels.
Yep, that's what the amendment is.
And any more discussion
And
before?
if this is accepted, then it's done.
Nope. Then you still have to pass the motion, or you can still amend the motion at 1. So right now we have a motion on the floor for 1.5 increase. We have an amendment to that motion to go from 1.5 to 1. You have to vote on that. You still come back to the motion. Original motion now be if it passes a 1. If it doesn't pass, it's 1.5. You can still amend that, not pass it, propose a different motion. You have all those things to the table. You just have to address this piece right here.
Okay.
I thought a friendly amendment was gonna make this easier.
and this is obviously pretty fluid because like we just did this last year. We're looking at it again. We can look at it again next year. If we did vote for the 0.5 and next year we decide that's a mistake,
Yeah, this is a 1 year thing.
1 year thing.
And we have to vote on it. If we don't vote on it, it goes back to the original, correct?
Original.
Yes.
If you kill the amendment, kill the motion, it goes back to the original policy, and that's where we're at.
Any more discussion before we vote on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment of moving to 1 student rather than 1.5, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
So we have 1. All right, now,
We had just one, Scotty, correct?
Yep.
For tracking? All right. So
now we will move forward with the vote to approve it with the 1 student increase for the 26-27 school year.
and you still have ability to discuss this after the amendment.
So, do we have to motion and approve that? Okay.
Motion's on the table. You just have discussion and then a vote.
Any discussion?
So if, by the way, my light quit working on my screen. Oh, there it is again. Anyway, so if we wanted to amend, let's just say 4 through 8 or whatever we got here, we could, now is the time to do that.
You make an amendment to the original
I'm
motion.
just going off like what Scotty was talking about. If we left the K3 lower, now would be the time to do it.
Yes, you could do that.
Just curious.
Lee, your mic is not working because it's not used to being operated this much. I mean, that's sarcasm again. Yeah. Any discussion?
Well, if that K3 is really important to you guys, that might be something you'd want to amend because I think the more the merrier in this one.
I'm just thinking if we left that at 1, could we make an amend the motion to make 4 through whatever back to 1.5 and leave K3 at 1? Just wondering if that would help us and not be quite so hard on the staff.
How about a motion to go ahead and add the half back into the 4th and up? But leave the K3 at 1.
Can we do that? Because that overturns our last amended one.
No.
You can still do it.
Okay.
So just to clarify the amendment that she's proposing, keep K through 3 at 1, grades 4 through 8 at 1.5.
So Terry with the motion,
Just need a second.
Yes.
I'll second.
Aaron with the second.
Discussion.
Discussion
Now,
time.
discussion.
Wait for.
Terry and Aaron with the second.
Yep.
Aaron.
Government in action.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, now to vote on K through 3 with a 1 increase and 4 through 12 with a 1.5, 4 through 8 with a 1.5 increase because 9 through 12 is going to be building capacity. Any discussion? How's it going over there, Tanya?
So very simply, we're down to original motion after amendments, K through 3, 1, 4 through 8, 1.5. This is the final motion, if you don't amend it, to move forward with this. And you have a first and a second on it, and you just have to vote.
And Lee was the initial motion, and I don't remember who's
Megan.
Megan. Hearing no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Clarify, I was not the second for the original motion. Lee's motion at the very beginning?
Yep.
Yeah.
You were.
Mhm.
She was my second.
She seconded both.
Well,
Scotty. What do you have written down there? Yep, you got it down.
Yeah.
Okay. That's why we give Tanya time to write it all down to make sure we get that correct.
That was the easy one. That was the first one before all the discussion. All right, 8E, amend the Harlow's contract number 2. Superintendent Wayne Wormstead is requesting board approval of the contract amendment with Harlow's bus service under proposed amendment service routes R2, R6, and R11. Will permanently be removed from the existing contract and no longer be serviced by Harlow's for the remainder of the 25-26 school year, starting March 9th, 2026. The compensation paid for Harlow's shall be adjusted downward by reducing the mileage of the routes R2 effective 3/9/2026, R6 3/9/2026, and R11 effective 3/10/2026 from the rate scheduled for the remaining days of the 25-26 school year. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Tom with the motion,
Second.
Tim with the second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Eight F, amend Dakota Bus Contract Number 2. Under proposed amendment number 2, service routes R2, R6, and R11 have been added to the existing contract and serviced by Dakota Bus for the remainder of the 25-26 school year, starting March 9th through June 30th, 2026 at a rate of $500 per bus per day. The addendum is temporary in nature and is intended solely to provide uninterrupted transportation services in advance of the master contract term beginning in July 1, 2026. Do we have a motion?
so moved.
Terry with the motion,
Second.
Megan with the second. Any discussion?
Well, just what's the cost difference that we're going to be dealing with on this?
Dakota bus cost is more per mile than Harlow's. We'll go back to the bid or the RFP amount with Dakota Bus on July 1. They're at $500 a day Dakota Bus, all right? And they're more expensive right now than our current contract with Harlow's because that was our only option. Okay, we had to run the routes. We needed to get them in there, but as soon as the contract is done at the end of May, and we resume back in August, it'll be back at our contracted routes with Dakota Bus, Tom.
Yep. So right now we're spending more, and then we did the fuel pass through with them, and then we're seeing the excise fuel cost above $3.90 with the diesel fuel at $5 a gallon too. So our busing costs right now are considerably more expensive than we planned on or saw in January, with fuel being lower.
The upside is we've had positive feedback
Yes.
from our buildings that the service consistency has been much improved. So the downside, Tom, is we're paying more money for the service. The upside is that service seems to be improved. So we hope it continues on the rest of the year, and we'll build back on this as the contract begins July 1 with Dakota Bus.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8G, TransFinder contract, software license, and hosting agreement. Superintendent Wayne Wormstead recommends the board approve the $9,840 license agreement for TransFinder, the student transportation management software, to ensure the district maintains access to the system. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Aaron with the motion,
Second.
Brian with the second. Any discussion?
So this is buried in the Harlow's contract. Harlow's actually currently owns the TransFinder rights to that, to release that. They've officially told us they would not release that information. I've sent a follow-up email to make sure that all that information after school's done, all that student information is actually deleted from the records. The best system way to work this is the district actually owns the software, owns the student information, and secures that. So, and then if we ever have any change in bus companies in 7-8 years, we don't have to go through this again.
And after tonight, Tanya has been working with TransFinder to do a rollout so we can not only get that purchase going, but we can start bringing Dakota Bus people in to start that process sooner than later.
I'm assuming if we would have done this with Harlow's again, like if we'd have just whenever that contract got signed with TransFinder, we would have probably not done it this way, but maybe not understanding it completely what it was and what it would do.
No, we were unaware that we would not, within the contract, that they'd have to release that to us when that was added to it. That we were not aware of that. So we're fixing that for future situations, but if they should ever happen again.
And what does Dakota Bus currently do or has been doing in the past? How do they adjust for this if they don't use this $9,800 license? How do they keep track?
Spearfish is a much smaller district for a lot fewer routes and a lot fewer miles. So they can do it the old-fashioned way, a little bit easier.
They literally go out and drive the routes, see what it is.
And how many routes do we have?
21.
21.
Over 2,000 miles a day.
It also talks with Infinite Campus too, which is a hugely important part of it. When Harlow's initially, was that 2 or 3 years ago, when they initially decided to use TransFinder, that was something that we found a little bit eye-opening as a district, that we didn't have. It wasn't organized very well.
So
when we shifted to TransFinder, not to mention improving the routes themselves, efficiencies, but also communicating with Infinite Campus, so we know which kids are on which buses.
Much more accurate
Very
information.
important. Yeah, I mean it's there's two big elements to it.
Before we were at the mercy of paper registration for about 1,700 kids.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8H, amend the capital outlay budget, Woodlefield sound system and TransFinder software. Business Manager Brett Burdick recommends the board amend the capital outlay budget for the following items. Woodlefield sound system upgrade in the amount of $14,500 to replace the sound system at Woodlefield. The funds will come from the Black Hills Orthopedic Sponsorship Agreement. And then also the TransFinder software license in the amount of $9,840 for student transportation services. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Scotty with the motion.
Second.
Megan with the second. Any discussion?
Yeah. What are we getting? $14,000 worth of speakers. We're replacing everything on the stadium.
We just replacing the sound system that got old and fell apart this last fall during the last two football games, I think it was.
I think it blew up at homecoming.
Yeah, we're on
Right before
homecoming.
homecoming.
Oh yeah, I was there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we're just replacing is the sound
With
system.
what? And are we doing a complete system change?
We're doing speakers, the system behind that, lock cabinet, all that with that, mounted in the same areas.
Is this a wireless? Can you give me a little more? Detail on
Our
what the
AD
system
did
is?
most of the work on this. I authorized this in order to get done for track season for that. And we worked with
Scotty Jensen,
Scotty Jensen.
Sturgis Audio.
Sturgis Audio is the two that put this package together. You know, Scotty from the announcer that we use for everything. Yep, it's all really good. So if you want the specific details and stuff, I can send you the quote and the specs if you'd like that. But no, I did not memorize those as our AD and Scotty Jensen. And the Audio Pro guys did all that. I just made sure it fit within our sponsorship dollars and made sense. Yep.
In its entirety.
I think this is the middle of the line too. And the nice thing about it, when Jay told us, is they're going to be able to have it encased and protected. So it's just a matter of flipping the switch on. We have a lot of folks that use the facility and the sound system down there. And so it's going from group to group. And so there could be a potential for user error over the course of time. And this was supposedly designed, Tom, that's greatly reduced by it as a toggle switch on and a toggle switch off.
Everything else locked up and secured that way. Can't mess with it.
In full disclosure, for the 7 years that I've used the facility, one of the amps has always been blown.
It was in long overdue to do that, to replace it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8I, Woodfield Parking Lot, MOU. Business Manager Brett Burdick recommends the board approve the agreement with the City of Sturgis to replace the previous Woodfield Parking Lot MOU, which is no longer valid since the district has purchased the football field. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Megan with the motion, Terry with the second. Any discussion?
Basically just cleans up the language on the field itself and then focuses it all on the parking lot in terms of we have shared maintenance agreements. If anybody damages, it's their responsibility to fix it, especially through a construction project like the one we're going to undertake this summer. Or if the city holds an event on it, rally related, and it gets scuffed up, then they replace it. So this has all been worked through Mr. Bush, the Public Works Director at the city. And if it's approved tonight, then it'll be sent to Mr. Bush, and the council will review and act on it at their next meeting.
On that agreement, it has Kevin Forrester as the manager still. So I don't know if we want to update that before I sign it or.
Well, actually, the mayor pro tem will be one that signs it regardless of the name because that's the acting mayor.
Well, I just didn't know if we wanted this
We
to
can do that.
reflect it accurately.
We can have Eric Neese amend that for us. And we get the name, if we have the name of the interim mayor, then we can sure put that on there, Justin. Thank you.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 8J, Sturgis Brown High School East Campus Farming and Haying Lease Agreement. Business Manager Brett Burdick recommends the board approve the proposed haying and farming lease agreement with Grubel Alkali Ranch for the Sturgis Brown High School East Campus. This agreement covers the 26-27 and 27-28 seasons. It is anticipated that it will take 2 to 3 years to prepare the ground for reintroducing a new grass or alfalfa stand. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Brian with a motion.
Second.
Second from Tom. Any discussion?
So-
oh yeah, go ahead.
So the Grubel family, if this is approved tonight, they will keep an itemized list of their costs and materials. There'll be equipment rates, operator rates, and stuff put into that, and we will credit them their grazing fees on that. So Grubel have won the bid at grazing on the campus land out there at $92 an AUM. The example would be if we incur $1,500 worth of farming and cost to spray the stand and introduce an annual in there, then we would credit them $1,500 on their grazing. Then the following year, if it needs one more year of spraying and an annual stand to put in there, the same thing would happen the following year. The third year, the anticipation is that ground becomes back up into production, and then we would consider going out for bidding on the haying part of it.
And they're also paying $30 a ton for hay on this contract, right?
Right. So in your agreement that anything that's produced on there, that they would agree to buy our share of that tonnage at $30 a ton. So I think the first year they're going to go in there with like millet, all right, something that's going to go in there and produce a little bit of hay, be low cost for them. and then farm it again the second year, then introduce potentially a stand back in there. Yes, sir.
$30 a ton. Our share looks like it's straight across.
I read this straight across too, that there wasn't any share. It was just 30.
$30 per ton, right? Of the total production.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So if they produce 1,000 ton, they pay $30 a ton for the 1,000 ton. They
Yes.
keep the 70%, Tim. So it'd be 70. So whatever they produce, we've had a bid to where it's a mix, or they just pay us a straight dollar for hay produced.
Okay. No, I just had that question because
Yeah.
didn't see.
I didn't see the share in there, the
I didn't
70,
see
30,
the
60,
share
40,
either, so
65.
which I was going to say $30 a ton isn't too bad in today's world. They're putting it up and then they pay that.
So I'll have to double check. I believe that was the language that was on the existing hay agreement as well. That any hay produced off there that Nick Uherka paid us $30 a ton for what he put up.
And you're saying in $30 a ton for the entire that he put up.
So I think Nick paid us like $1,500 at least. So he put whatever tonnage he put up, he paid us $30 on that tonnage.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
We've done a share too where it's a 70-30 split, but I have asked them, they just say we pay you a straight ton for what we produce. We get a couple weight slips on it and we call it good.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8K MB Services spray quote. Business Office and Business and Grounds Department are requesting a board approve the agreement with MB Services in the amount of $13,107.60 for the application of fertilizer and weed killer for all Meade School District facilities. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Aaron with the
Second.
motion, Lee with the second, and I will be abstaining as I do contract for MB Services from time to time.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
All right.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item 8L, approve visible difference custodial bid for Stage Barn Middle School. Business Manager Brett Burdett is recommending the board approve the custodial bid with visible difference and issue a contract for custodial services at Stage Barn Middle School for the 26-27 and 27-28 school years in the amount of $183,000, $183,216. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Terry with the motion,
Second.
Aaron with the second. Any discussion?
This is just evening services, janitorial
No, this is day and night. This is for the, so, and so as we'll just answer these questions on this particular one. That our starting wage for custodian now is $20 an hour. We assume that we'll work about 20,080 hours a year. We take a look at that, we're at $41,600 just for wages. We add the payroll benefits in, that puts us up at our cost of $47,242. We add our $7,520 insurance benefit next year. Our cost then for a custodian is $54,944. Times 4, we're around that $213,000 a year annual. But that's at 8 hours a day. Okay, these folks are probably not working 8 hours a day at night. So this is where we start to compare these bids. Are they getting high in terms of what they're providing for the hours they're working? This is about a 9% increase over last year's contract with visible difference. The next one coming up is a little bit higher, okay? So that's kind of how we run the comparison when we vetted these bids, is what would cost us to do it if we could hire those people at our current rates, all right? Assuming that they're working 8 hours and they're not, all right? They're hiring more people at probably 2 to 3 hours a night as just discretionary income to come in after their first job. And it's kind of typical of what they're doing. That way they're not tied into the benefits. Their cost per hour is lower than ours. So that's kind of how we vetted all three of these bids when we opened them up here a couple weeks ago at about a half hour apart. And so again, this was 9% higher than what we did last year with visible difference. We've held them to less than 1.5% increase the last couple of years in terms of raises. So we're expecting a little bit of an increase.
We need some competition down there. Both of the Valley schools only got one bid each.
Yeah.
We don't get to control that, so. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8M, approve loose ends custodial bid for Piedmont Valley Elementary. Business Manager Brett Burdick recommends the board approve the custodial bid with loose ends to issue a contract for custodial services at Piedmont Valley Elementary for the 26-27 and 27-28 school year in the amount of $168,000. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Tom with the motion,
Second.
Lee with the second. Any discussion?
So we'll use that same example. This contract was 16% higher than it was a year ago, okay? But in relation to what it was, this is a full service deal. This day shift and night shift. So our crew down there would be 4, again at $20 an hour, around that $213,000 annually to staff Piedmont, and we're at this amount. So even though it was higher considerably than the year before, we feel it's in line there, but we're watching the contractors in terms of what they're working in terms of shifts too, to make sure that, you know, there's an acceptable profit margin built into every bid, but not an exorbitant profit margin built into every bid.
And you guys are happy with the results from both of them?
This particular contract, the folks at Piedmont are happy, Lee.
Okay.
They weren't so much happy at Sturgis Elementary. That's why the next bid was kind of the critical one of the 3.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8N, approve the 605 Ultimate Cleaners custodial bid for Sturgis Elementary. The business manager, Brett Burdick, is recommending the board approve the custodial bid for 605 Ultimate Cleaners and issue a contract for the custodial services at Sturgis Elementary for the 26-27 and 27-28 school year in the amount of $145,000. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Terry with the motion,
Second.
Scotty with the second. Any discussion?
This was the building we probably had the biggest dissatisfaction with service going on. And so we've been working with the current contractor through the course of the year. One of the things that we'll talk about at the discussion item is the transition between contractors. So as a contractor is leaving and another one's coming on in July 1, that June transition is a tough month because one wants to get out of there and the other one wants to get in, and one's maybe not doing as much work as they should. So we'll talk about potentially doing an amendment to Sturgis Elementary so that contractor can get out a month early, go to Piedmont. Then the new contractor coming in may come in a month earlier, and we'll discuss that at the discussion item later once we get through this motion. Okay?
Were there multiple bids for this one then too?
2. I think they were $6,000 apart there. I think your bid sheet might list
Yeah.
CleanRight, who is a contractor that's helping out at the high school in the 2 back rooms. The owner's name is Miranda Williamson, does a fine job. These guys are the folks that bid it. They used to clean at Sturgis Elementary, and then there was a disagreement. They started their own business. They're currently cleaning houses up at Powder River Pass over VRBOs, and these ladies are looking for something that is they live in Spearfish that is closer to town, and it might be a little bit easier on them. So Mrs. Lightenberg vetted all these. She knew these ladies, and she had no problem with their bid or their prior service in terms of cleaners when they were at Sturgis Elementary. So
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 8-0 ASBSD Board of Directors ballot. Board President Justin Judding is running for a seat at the ASBSD Board of Directors, Western Region. So essentially we have to make a vote between the 2 people that are running, which is myself and Tanya Gray. And I'm going to let Aaron take this because I'm going to have to abstain from this.
Did you want to share anything first before you take it over? You want to give your spiel?
So Tanya Gray, who has done it in the past, she's the incumbent, does a great job, I think. The reason that I chose to sign up for Board of Directors this time was simply because we've seen an increase in the cost to train board members through their online sessions, etc. And I want to have a voice at the table for how do we train board members moving forward, because that's super important to me that we make sure that our board members are trained well so that they can serve the communities that they're in. Not that I think that there's anything going on in the board of directors. I just thought that I could bring a different spin on it with educating board members.
All right.
I'm going to make a motion, Aaron,
Okay.
that the board support Justin in this position.
Second.
A motion to support Justin as our nominee for this
Okay.
position.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've got, Terry has the motion to select Justin as our collective vote. And then Brian with the second. All right, open for discussion.
I was going to say, I know Tanya. I know Justin will do a better job.
I thought I'd talk about Tanya a little bit more. No.
Any other
Tanya's on the
discussion?
SS or the BHSC
Yeah,
board with you.
I've debated her a few times.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, how long is that appointment for?
4 years. I'm a glutton for punishment.
Wow. All right. Hearing no more discussion. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. I will select Justin and get this paperwork put in.
Thank you for your guys' support. All right. 8P, approve surplus items. Business Manager Brett Burdett is recommending the board declare the following items as a surplus and be liquidated at the discretion of the business manager. In accordance with district requirements, the board will need to appoint 3 residents of the district to appraise the Woodle Field material. Atoll Elementary School Building is on the list, and Woodle Field material estimated volume of 3,500 cubic yards of material to be excavated. The Atoll Elementary School Building will need to be sold at auction or sealed bid. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to go ahead with the Woodle Field material and table the Atoll Elementary School for a calendar year.
So I'm going to have you break that into 2 separate ones. One is table the atoll for a year as a first one.
Okay.
So we can't have that joint, which is
Okay.
fine. Usually our surplus items are one motion, but since you're doing that,
Okay. I make a motion to table the Atoll Elementary building for 1 year, 1 calendar year.
So Tim with the second. Any discussion?
I'd just like to know more about
the
What-
process.
the process and what was brought to us today in open forum and
So what happens is any properties you can surplus and use those until you have a point where you actually sell them at auction, or if they have no value, they're disposed of with that. For that, according to, correct me, we'd have to see if we receive any bids. You'd have to then set a date. If you surplus Atoll Elementary, the board have to set a timeline for that auction. If there was bids received and you didn't have a minimum on that, then whoever got that bid would take that property. The second thing is if you receive no bids, the board would have to come and you could then do through private treaty after the auction. Is our understanding of state law.
Right. So the first process, Lee, is determine the value of the asset being surplus. And that's where the 3 appraisals come in. And that criteria is $2,500. Below $2,500, the board can work with somebody and do private treaty. Above $2,500, you do sealed bid or public auction. At your discretion, it's your timeline. Okay. That's kind of how the ending property went. It went public auction. We went out there and bought Bertolotto. Once it was decided the board wanted to surplus those, they did that. The timeline and the auction was determined by the board after that.
So what we do if it, with this motion in a second for the table of this, we would then not for a year look to surplus that property. So it'd be April of next year at this board meeting, you could surplus that. In the meantime, this summer, we would disconnect the power, do everything we're supposed to keep that building, disconnected, water so it doesn't freeze up, cover the windows so we don't have any breakage, things like that while it sat there for a year.
I guess where I'm at mainly is it's still a little raw, and on top of it, I guess I've never saw the district try to sell a building, that summer, and maybe we have, I don't know, but it just seems a little quick.
I got here on the tail end of Sulphur Creek, Lee, so I don't know when the first part is, but we did that on the Sulphur Creek site where the building was removed and then the site was reclaimed. And so, again, I gave you what was available at the registered deeds from Mrs. Anderson, so you can see whose names are on the deed. So the property stays with private owners. The district at that point owns the improvements on that property. So
Yeah.
it would be up to the board to decide how you want to do that.
Yeah, I think we need to wait a year on this and
Sure.
let the kids get out, and then see what happens in the next 6 months.
What are our what are our options? Is it by statute, like with that building?
Yeah, that's legislative audit. And so there's certain other governmental entities you can deal with without going to bid, Brian, or offering
City
to
or
sell to the
county
public.
or state.
Since they consider the improvements done with tax dollars, they consider then the public should have an opportunity. Beyond that, you can get a legal opinion on the concept of should it be gone back to the landowner or not. And that would probably be a legal opinion in legislative audit to review that.
So do we have any plans then on doing anything to this building other than making sure it's winterized, but no more improvements at this time? And with the property, no more improvements? Is that
No, that's
where you
correct.
stand? We stand?
With the
So-
insurance would probably be dropped on it. It's July 1. And then the electricity utility service would be disconnected. The account shut down, and then minimal maintenance on the site.
And so the first step is to surplus property. The board then has to choose how they want to go through that process, sealed bid, auction, or whatever else. So this is just the first step. It doesn't mean you have to go to the next step or can change that. So that's up to you guys.
And the discussion with the landowner.
Yep.
And that's where the deed is given to Lee and his family, and kind of the intent of how they want to see it proceed.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, there'd be talk with the landowner before we decide what to do with it.
So you want to table it for a full year though?
That's my
Yep.
motion, is to table it for a year, let the dust clear a little bit, see what happens in the next 6 months, and I mean, we can decide next year on what to do with it. And I know there's going to be a little cost on maintenance, but it'll be minimal for 6 months or whatever it'll
Yeah.
be, 8 months.
Especially if it doesn't rain or something like that. It'll be some mowing and some spraying and some weeds, Lee, and whatever.
Yeah.
Really getting feedback from your family on what they want to see.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's any questions, you can contact me and I can figure something out too.
Yeah.
In the auction, can we include the reclamation in that? So the purchaser of the property also does the reclamation?
Yes.
You can. Yeah, Wayne, go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, you can actually do that. Yeah. So you set your parameters for your sealed bid. Okay, or auction, that the person that purchased has to reclaim this property and things like that, which, we know that would limit that. Then you might be in a private treaty after that, those things there too.
And any bid that comes in, we're going to pay that person to take that property because of the reclamation side of it, more than likely.
Potentially.
Yes, that's correct.
That was the case. There was a building down at Stage Barn, Justin, that they thought it was going to bring a lot of money on surplus, and by the time it got done, it was not a
It's not a winning opportunity.
Could this building be utilized anywhere else in the district as a move for, I don't know, housing
It's on a
football
foundation.
players on the field or doing something?
It's on a concrete basement, and it wouldn't be easy to move either. I mean, I'm not saying it's not movable, but it wouldn't be super simple. It's not like,
logical thing would be to let it sit right there and let the landowner assume ownership of it. But
yeah,
governmental work doesn't always
Yeah.
work logically. So we're bound to do what's set forth in the legislative audit and legal, and then hopefully a year from now we'll be able to make some decisions and go from there.
so I just made the motion on Atoll, so the other will have to have another motion,
Yep.
correct?
We're just
Okay.
voting on Atoll now.
Yep.
All those in favor, say aye. So all those in favor of tabling it for a year?
That's all only that piece.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, do we have a motion on Woodle Field surplus?
So moved.
Aaron with the motion,
Second.
Tim with the second. Any discussion?
So we have interest in that dirt that would come in for auction or sealed bid. Do we have to choose on that? Within parameters that we will set up according to our contract within certain mileage and distance of the school. Otherwise, we just eat the mileage cost over to our high school, dump it there. If someone would buy that and cover some of that cost on us, it'd be a net saving or a net gain for us on this project.
And absolve the district of any liability once the material is removed.
So we'll draft up a RFP for that for sealed bids and go from there, and then have that out, and they have to meet our timelines and everything else.
It's gonna be all or nothing, right?
Yep. It is everything. has to be able to be done. You have to be able to move it to the property you want. There's some people in the community that need some fill dirt.
Can't slow the project down. There's a lot of things we'll build into it. And again, if it's too restrictive, it might limit the amount of people who are interested in participating in that bid.
And if nobody takes that, we're out newspaper ads. That's it. And we still go with our plan to put it out at the high school.
Yep.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 9, policy review, non-action items. 9A, amend school board policy, JFA, student due process. ASBSD recently updated policy JFA. The policy committee recommends adopting the policy to maintain in alignment with ASBSD. This is a second reading of the school board policy, JFA, student due process.
You see the notes and highlights and the changes and everything in there. It's still the same as first reading.
If you have comments, reach out to policy committee. 9B, second reading of school board policy GCBDF, nursing mothers. ASBSD has recently updated policy GCBDF. While this policy is not currently in place with our district, the policy committee recommends the board adopt this policy. So we have how we are conducting business right now, but not formally in policy.
So this one here, we are actually following the FMLA and the federal law that actually deals with nursing mothers. You did have that email with a concern about this. We did review this and we are doing it correctly. We did leave some things open-ended because there is some areas of how that works. You can't tie yourself into very specific times. You have to make that accommodation for that, and we have to be flexible in that. So it is accurate after review.
9C, amend school board policy JGD, student suspension and expulsion. The policy committee recommends amending policy JGD to align with ASBSD. As part of the revision, JGE will be removed from the title, allowing JGD to stand alone on its own separate policy. Additionally, exhibits JGDE1, JGDE2, JGDE3, JGDE4, and regulation JGDR1 are recommended for adoption to support this policy JGD. This is the first reading of the policy JGD, student suspension and expulsion.
So this goes along actually with JFA as we continue to move that forward. JGD just is the process that we're legally obligated to do for all students with disabilities and also students without disabilities. And it just breaks that out for the entire process, including if we have an expulsion, which is anything over up to a year, anything over the 10 days that a principal can suspend that has come through my office, and then possibly to a board hearing for approval of a long-term suspension or expulsion. This just really formalizes what we've been doing through state law and puts it in our policy book.
(9D) amend school board policy JFCH, alcohol and other drug use by students. The policy committee recommends amending policy JFCH to align with ASBSD standards. As part of the revision, JFCG and JFC will be removed from the title, allowing JFCH to stand on its own separate policy. This is the first reading of school board policy JFCH, alcohol and other drugs used by students. JFC, student conduct, was adopted to stand on its own policy in November of 25. So if you remember when we started these policies 3 years ago, we had all these policies that were jumbled together. Some of these policies that we had to update, we left them together, and now it's kind of breaking those apart. So it's easier to track with ASBSD.
Routine.
(9E) amend school board policy IKFA, graduation requirements and early graduation. Due to the state discontinuing the NCRC assessment used to report college and career readiness, schools are adjusting graduation requirements accordingly. Sturgis Brown High School Principal Pete Wilson and the policy committee recommend the following revisions to this policy. This is the first reading of school board policy IKFA.
So one piece with this, we're working with the state to identify how we currently do our youth internship program, also with our NCRC and our OSHA training with you take 2 CT credits. So we think there might be a second revision on this where it might end up saying half unit of senior project capstone or youth internship or NCRC CTE accreditation process. So we're finalizing that piece. We believe we meet it with what we're doing right now because we have been. We're just making sure the state approves that for that. So when we go to our accreditation in a year or so, and that it aligns to our accreditation process. So there might be one revision coming. Mr. Wilson and I just talked today after he talked to the state. So we think we have that finalized to put in as the next piece.
So I feel like that looks different than what we talked about at policy committee.
We have a couple.
So do we get an answer on the NCRC and if that's going to still be valid?
That's what we're talking about. The NCRC combined with our CT course and the OSHA assessment those kids do in that group, which is about 70% of our kids, that would count. But now we're asking for the state to provide that in writing. So when Beth Johnson over there does our accreditation process, we don't have a different reviewer than the person that told us on the phone. We get in writing from the state that this is okay. So that piece would be added in. If you want to hold this for another first reading, that's fine for that. You can amend on second reading too, but it's up to you guys if you'd like to do that. I'm just informing you what I found out this afternoon from Mr. Wilson and Colleen Keffler.
We can amend on second and third reading. I mean,
Okay, that's fine. I just feel like we need more information because do we know what that looks like going forward in the high school?
So yeah, so that actually allows us right now, the NCRC and what we do right now, to actually matches what we currently do with the OSHA and the CTE courses. So that actually matches what we currently do. We thought that was going to be wiped out when the state would not pay for NCRC. We may have to pay for some NCRC to match what we currently do for our kids with their CT credits and their crossover with the OSHA assessment that those kids take after taking 2 CT classes. Combined with the NCRC, they actually meet that guideline. According to what we've been told, now we're waiting for a report or in writing from the state. It gives our kids 3 options then. So if we have a fine arts student is taking all fine arts credits and they are not in the CT world, they can do capstone project or youth internship and still meet the state guidelines. If you have students like we have a lot of students in the CT world that want to be doing these things, it allows them that pathway to meet that state guideline now too. We're just waiting for that final piece in writing. Mr. Wilson was replying back to him today to get that in an actual document.
So the state's mandating stuff without giving guidance, correct? That's what I'm understanding.
Unclear guidance.
Correct.
When they eliminated the NCRC funding, it took this whole piece out that everybody was doing, and our counselors that we were aligned very well with, it just sort of fell apart, correct, Beth? When they took that out, now we're trying to say, okay, how do we maintain what we do for this group of students on their career tech ed track? We're taking the OSHA assessment. Now do they have to jump over to a senior project capstone and do those things they're doing? We're trying to make our pathways for our kids as clear as possible and streamline that for graduation, not create an extra hurdle or step later on. So really it's going to say half unit, project capstone, or youth internship. And our goal is to say, or the CTE OSHA standard test with that. And we may have to do CRC or the NCRC or not. We're waiting for that in writing.
Yeah, it's going to have to be amended. I see a bunch of typos in here already, so not a bunch, couple.
We can do another first reading because we have May, June, and July to finalize that. Before that for handbooks and everything.
and what you're talking about is like an OSHA 10 certification that they get?
You're going to ask me the wrong OSHA test. I'm not quite sure which one it is.
So I'm just asking because like you can go online and buy that for $39, $49. So if the student goes and does that but doesn't do the CTE courses, they actually met that requirement?
No, it's OSHA plus the CT courses.
Okay.
I'm looking at Beth from the nodding as she's over there doing
It's
this.
introductory. You got to do the one to do the CT courses.
So did they add a requirement, or they just took the paid test away?
Take the paid test away and sort of insert the senior project capstone as that because now
The state.
that's my understanding. Yes.
Okay, so we're not 100% sure.
Because we had to have a pathway for our kids for senior project, youth internship, or the NCRC with the OSHA stuff. They pulled this funding away from the test, and it sort of broke that apart, is my understanding. So a lot of schools are trying to figure that out, and we're trying to keep what we have because of the number of kids it serves.
And I think Colleen builds that into her Perkins application every year.
Yep. Beth, am I really close? She's like, yeah. If you want to hear
She'll
any
tell
more
you later that you're not.
Yeah. Yeah, she can fill you in more details on this as she's working on this for accreditation, working through.
So the state took away the NCRC test that they paid for, and that was part of the college and career readiness portion of the report card. And so that's the part that districts are struggling with, is we have to still meet this requirement for the report card, but now we don't have the means to do so. And so on the career readiness side, the students have to have an advanced high school diploma or a career and technical readiness endorsement. So they have to have either of those, where the capstone is going to serve for that advanced endorsement on the diploma, or we can do the career technical readiness certification course. And there's a list of pre-approved courses. OSHA is one, but there's other ones like a CNA endorsement. There's a whole list that the state has provided on their career and technical ed site. So does that answer? Okay.
The NCRC was a big grab away because that was a career readiness piece that we had for kids to take. Yep.
I do recall the two classes plus the OSHA now through these standards meetings that I've been in this spring. All right, hearing no more discussion. Who would have thought that one would have brought up a whole bunch of discussion tonight? Huh? Item 10, discussion items. 10A, notice of school board election. The school district election will be held June 2nd, 2026 in all voting precincts in the school district. Number 46-1, Sturgis, South Dakota, and Meade School District number 46-1, Lawrence, South Dakota. The election polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time on the day of the election. 4 candidates have filed timely nominating petitions for the election. The business office drew the order of the candidates on the ballot. The order will be as follows: Derek Allen, 4-year term; Tamara P. Hannon, 4-year term; Brian Voigt, 4-year term, incumbent; Megan Snyder, 2-year term, incumbent; unopposed, and no election. (10B), notice of deadline for voter registration. Voter registration for Meade School District 46-1 school board election will be held on the second day of June 2026 and will close on May 18th, 2026 at 5 p.m.
You can register online, so if you're not registered, get registered.
10C, bus route change request. All requests for Meade School District bus route changes for the 26-27 school year were to be submitted by Wednesday, April 1st. The requests are being reviewed by the Transportation Committee and Dakota Bus for their recommendations. Actions on the request will be taken by the board at the August board meeting.
So we'll set after school's out, we'll set our transportation committee to meet and go through each one of those requests. This is just what our policy guideline says we have to receive these by. And you said we received 5? Yeah.
I don't know if this really belongs here, but since we're discussing, does Dakota Bus have any smaller buses, or are they all like the big, like size school buses?
When you say what size is small?
I don't know, like smaller
12,
than
14?
the regular 70 capacity school bus or whatever.
Yeah,
it
they got
is.
70. They have the
Smaller
regular-
than that.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, realistically, they're buying a fleet right now.
Yeah.
I just like where Missy and I grew up, like, like a regular size bus goes by there and it feels like there's 5 kids on there. I don't know. So I was just wondering like what their fleet is like, or if there's any.
They're currently purchasing the fleet for this contract.
Okay. All right.
Based our bus route capacities off our current routes that we have.
Yeah. Good.
10D, Meade County Sheriff's Office, SRO MOU 2627. The Meade County Sheriff's Department will be providing an SRO for Piedmont Valley Elementary and Stage Bar Middle School for the 26-27 school year. This is an increase of $5,000 to the Meade school or the Meade Sheriff's Department budget, not the overall budget. Just wanted to throw that in there. It wasn't on there, so.
Yep. So yeah, we have a $5,000 increase for this to serve both schools. For that from the Sheriff's Department. They also have done areas, including going out to rural Meade at CMCS for different programs and things like that.
I'm sorry, this is an increase to us for $5,000?
Yes,
Wasn't this? It's a net decrease.
net decrease
Okay.
without the other contract, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Increase this contract, decrease overall the cost.
10E, fiscal year 27 through 29 master facility plan. Business manager Brett Burda has provided a draft master facility plan for the fiscal years 27 through 29 for the board to review.
So part of the improvement plan that we met with as we started the student improvement deal was to try to get out there and put more information out for the general public that might be interested in what projects that we're looking at doing in the course of the next 3 to 5 years. We've had a 5-year capital outlay plan in place for a long time. Don't necessarily put it out on a website to look at in terms of, so we were tasked with coming up with a smaller scaled down version of what that might look like with some anticipated cost in terms of project by building, projects by school over the course of 3 years. So what you see is a draft amount or draft a version of that that we brought in front of the Buildings and Grounds Committee, and they were okay with bringing that to the board to look at. And if the board is okay, then we could use a version like that to put out on the website and then update it annually. Any questions on that?
And this is just major stuff at those buildings.
Yeah, these are just our bigger capital projects, Justin, and that we've identified in the capital outlay process. Again, we start in October, so it won't be long. We'll be out meeting with administrators, going over the projects that we've just completed, getting their wish list for the following year or what we've identified in there. So we'll take that down, move 26, 27 up, or 27, 28 up, and then add a new list at the bottom that we've identified in our 5-year capital outlay plan. Again, once it, the 5-year range, that year 4 and 5 are not real solidified. Once we get into year 2 and 3, we pretty much know that we're going to try to do a project and bring it to the committee for their review and hopefully their approval. What's on there that we really don't have a good defined pathway for is at the high school, which would be a potential CTE addition. That's been a discussion item for the board, this board and past boards, probably for the last 6 or 7 years. And so we've identified that as something we strongly would like to do. Haven't got to narrow down to what that looks like. I know Mr. Wormsted's going to be bringing that back up this fall for a little bit more of discussion in terms of trying to put a plan in place there.
We're anywhere between 12 months and 18 months out that we need to have a decision in the direction we're going with that process to go to 30% complete plans for moving forward on a CT project or not moving on a CT project. Our debt comes off at that right time for us to, within our current funding means, to add debt back on to take on the project.
So again, there will be collaboration between the finance committee, whoever's on it, and the buildings and grounds committee to look at what that 3 to 5 year pathway looks like for levies and what that pathway looks like for capital projects and how those two align or disalign. All right. One of the things we talked about when we bring the levy request up in July at $7,940,000 would be some of that money going to one of those future savings tranches that we've discussed, whether that be a building project, whether it be future land, whether it be catastrophic loss or self-insurance. We talked earlier that since now we can pay for that premium in capital outlay, the self-insurance component might settle down to that proprietary list, and a capital project might move up a little higher in terms of what we're saving for.
So Finance Committee on Monday will actually learn about changing that from 4-bucket system to a 3-bucket system because of those items there moving forward, which allow you to focus on where those funds, and they come to the bottom line where you want to put them. Any questions or any comments on what we've presenting here for a quick 3-year look, current plus 2? And we go out further than that, but those are very shiftable past that, where they're going to fall based on needs. But these are projects that we feel are going to take place within the next 3 years of our budget. Moving forward, 26, 27, we're pretty much locked in now. And then looking at 27, 28 and following those out.
F, food service benefit payable audit entry. Business Manager Brett Burdett will review the current financial status of the food service department and discuss the recommendations to establish an ongoing transfer from the general fund to support it. This item will return in May for formal board action.
So at the conclusion of the 24-25 audit, Casey Peterson recommended that we do a correction to the food service payable. And we went through that dialogue that over the course of many years, that the money that was collected from food service employees was going into a payable account, but ultimately was probably being paid out of the general fund, which made the food service payable account grow larger over time. And every year it should come back closer to zero, all right? And over the course of time, it got larger. It was identified many years ago through the audit process, and the recommendation was to make that correction. As we go through, and as Mrs. Ramdale expressed, that food service is really in a position now that we're going to be probably be relying on general fund money to get us through some tough times if needed. And the recommendation between Rhonda and I would be then to have the general fund just permanently loan that money to the food service. This entry will not involve any cash. That's already been done. That entry was done over the course of years by not expensing those payables out of there. The entry we were talking about will come directly, go up a little bit, Tanya. Right here. Okay. Due from government is a receivable. Okay, if we go down even farther is the payable, the liability. So anything above here is considered an asset, anything down there is a liability. So when you're looking at a receivable and a liability, the cash is already done. We've already pulled that out. So the recommendation is the entry is going to be, is just making a transfer, a permanent transfer from the general fund into food service, and it's done by an entry to a revenue and an entry to a receivable. So the transfer out would come out of the general fund through a journal entry and show up, and that money would then show up and zero that out. This would become zero, this would drop it down to zero. This receivable will be increased to zero through that transfer. No cash. Cash is all done up here in our savings accounts. So once we write a check, it's posted, boom, 101, 105, get credited right away. What we're dealing down here is our receivables, our future revenues that we may collect and haven't collected, or expenditures down here in the payables that we may pay but haven't currently paid. Okay, that's what we're correcting by this entry. We're just squaring up the receivable and the payable to take care of this. All been reviewed by the auditor the last two audits. We've identified this. We've done the legwork to get it on the books to show that this correction is. And now with everything in food service, we'd like the board to consider making it a permanent transfer in to food service from general fund to get it out the books permanently. No cash involved. It's just an entry. Questions? The backstory is long. I think you've got it. Deidre Boudall, the CPA from Casey Peterson, explained it over time. I had Mrs. McGilvery, Mrs. Berner, and Mrs. Geike all think about how would we explain that to somebody who has no idea what we're talking about in terms of dumping into AI. And it really is, it's we have 3 funds where we're collecting premiums out of, and we have probably 4 different prorated premiums that we're collecting money on in terms of, is it a partial premium or a full premium, being 9, 10, and 12 month. And years of service between 0 and 5, we pay a prorated percent of that. 5 years and longer, we pay 100% of that. So the folks in there who are taking that 6 to 7 page bill from Wellmark Blue Cross that just tells an employee and a deduction, and they're trying to find which fund it is, where that money comes out of, to make sure that they're balancing or reconciling to the best of their ability every month. Okay.
So it's an accounting transaction. It's not a cash transaction. Nope. Correct. Additionally, is this fixed going forward? I know this is a pain, like this specific thing we've talked about in the past is a pain. Would this accounting transaction fix the problem long term? Or will this be a...
It makes it a lot better, Brian, to where it's manageable. We have asked Casey Peterson to give us the bulletproof process to follow, and they don't have it. Okay? It is a month-to-month deal based on the employees and based on the time of year. You have to remember, we're collecting more than we're paying out the first 9 months of the year because we're providing benefits June, July, and August when those people aren't working. So this payable gets bigger and bigger over the course of the year, and then towards the end of the year, you're supposed to get smaller and come back to zero. Somebody quits, something happens like that, it changes over the course of time. The goal is to zero it out every year, Brian, and that end of the year means August, not necessarily June 30th. right? Because we have all that accrued payroll coming in for June, July, and August on our certified staff. We have those 9, 10, and 12-month employees who are support staff that may get 100% and they may get 85%. They might work in the enterprise fund, they might work in special services, or they might work in the general fund. So those folks in that office are drilling that statement every month.
The money is moved by the end of August every year. All the cash is done.
Sure, that cash.
It's the accounting transaction, right? That's okay.
Yeah, it really is. It'll look like there's a revenue code called transfer out and a revenue code called transfer in. No cash tied to it. What's tied to it is the receivable account. Okay, that receivable is never going to come in. This entry is going to fix that. Okay, so go to the business office to try to manage that payable to the best of their ability. All right. And our payroll person goes to a monthly meeting in their year, and they talk to their colleagues and say, hey, what's the mousetrap that you guys have that make this thing zero out every year? And they go, they don't. Okay. So the course of it is to manage it over time and work with the auditor to make sure that we're doing things compliantly. And we do. We're meeting in June with the auditor again. They're going to look at all our stuff before we even start the audit next September. We do that every June. So bring it back next month as an action item. And with the journal entry on there for review and your consideration to approve.
Item 11, reports. 11A is administrator reports. Anybody want to?
Just real quick, I want to follow back up on the custodial bids. All right, I've had a request from Loose Ends Cleaning, who is the current contractor at Sturgis Elementary, if you would consider terminating their contract at the end of May by amending it and then awarding the last month to Ultimate 605. Okay, we would essentially shorten Loose Ends contract at Sturgis Elementary by 1 month, and we would amend and extend 605 cleaners by 1 month from 12 to 13 months to aid them in that transition. Loose Ends still has Piedmont. They would like to get their staff transitioned to Piedmont and get that building started, and then allow the new cleaners to come in at the beginning of the cleaning process and start that facility. And so they would wanted to know if the Board of Education would consider amending those contracts by 1 month, reducing one by 1 month and extending one by 1 month for the same amounts in which they bid.
And both parties are open to it?
That's correct. I told them I couldn't guarantee anything until I talked to the Board of Education. So both are on board, principal's on board. It's whether you as an advisory board would consider bringing those two contracts to amend for next year.
I think it seems logical.
Okay.
Like if one wants out, one wants in.
In the past, it hasn't been smooth. This happened at Piedmont Valley. One contractor got it, the other one didn't. One wasn't doing much in June, according to the one contractor. The other contractor was doing all the work, and vice versa. And it got to be tough to manage, to where the one was asked just to leave. So, if you're willing, we'd bring that back, those two amendments to the contracts, just for June. Thank you.
We've talked more about amendments tonight than we have my entire 4 years on the board. All right, 11A, administrators. Seeing nobody run to the microphone. Board members, I guess I'm going to present on stoplight report. Good news is we jumped up in educational hours this month. So the very top yellow number there, we went from like 38 hours to 51 hours. So during that March meeting, we had about an hour and a half of board training during that, which informed the board members of how special services functions in our district, and then strategic planning training also during that session. The other one that jumped, so we went from 2 people meeting the 10-hour requirement to 3 now. So that puts us at 33%. And then the other area that we saw movement was in the amount of people that have attended 1 to 3 events. So those have moved up on that list. So we jumped there a little bit more. So we're moving the mark there. If you guys are attending events, just if you don't remember where access to that spreadsheet is, just send me a text message. I'll throw you on there. If you don't know which ones have counted for you or haven't, just reach out to me and I can definitely run through that real quick with you. Because I know that there's people on that list that have attended more events than what are showing up on there, but I don't know how to track those without reaching out to you. And then strategic planning, we've hit all of those except for the meet every 90 days. We met for the first time during that March 30th to discuss that. And I don't know that the 90 days thing is going to work.
When we're trying to manage the 17 admin, 18 admin to make sure we're moving forward in all of our goals from our buildings and stuff like that, the compilation, trying to get that over, I can meet with each one. It's limited in time, especially on a monthly basis. So when we do our June review of our goals, we're gonna have to look at that and see if there's a better process for that. We know when we do this goal setting, we're gonna have some areas that we're gonna go really, really well, and some that we're gonna have to change and tweak. I think this is one of them how we get board more engaged on that.
Item 11C, Black Hills Special Services Co-op. Terry, you got an update for us?
Ooh. At our meeting, we actually met the staff that is located in Pierre, which we don't think about it, but Black Hills Special Services does have an office in Pierre, and most of what they do is handle the grants and contracts that come through South Dakota Health and Human Services. So there's a staff there. They're the ones that oversee the 7 nurses that work statewide. And some of the programs are the Bright Start, which I've talked about before, prenatal care, the development disabled at home care. And the other thing they do then is they follow those contracts and grants to make sure that all the money is allocated to all the appropriate spots so that we don't get into any trouble. And as a side note, I was thinking about it because it does sound strange that that Black Hills Special Services has an office in Pierre. That came about many years ago when the co-op was starting to get grants from the state that were to be implemented statewide. And East River wasn't happy. So as a compromise, the co-op opened an office in Pierre. And now they're happy. And the co-op then does oversee the variety of grants that are generally statewide at that office. So that was our program.
And Black Hills Special Services Co-op isn't just South Dakota either.
No, they do, well.
They go into Wyoming.
They go into Wyoming on some. They even do Louisiana. Because I can remember giving a report on parishes and somebody had to announce to the office or audience what a parish was in Louisiana. Yeah, exactly. So I know that as far as they go, and those are all connections they make when they go to conferences, some of the national conferences.
Item 11D, Superintendent Wayne Wormstead will give us a brief report.
Quickly, just to touch on something Mr. Bird had talked about with the volatility funding, realize that now about 70 to 73% of all funding for schools general fund is now through sales tax. Okay, that's statewide. Ours is probably going to be more 60-40, 62-38, something like that, property tax. And then when you look at those numbers on that shifting there, that's going to create a system where we have much more volatility. If the state all of a sudden has a bad year collecting sales tax, that's going to directly affect funding to schools. Okay, so when you really think about what your reserves are and that to take those swings out of the budget, it's going to be very important moving forward on those items as we sort of protect that general fund to a degree and protect that reserve in the general fund, because you have a year where all of a sudden it could be 0-0 or maybe -3, -4 on that. So there's much more volatility in how that happens based on how our state economy does with that. The stable factor, would like it or not, is actually property taxes for school funding within that. So, I mean, the good news is when they did this, they went from 2.58 mils on an owner-occupied home down to 0.669. Okay, that's a significant savings for people per $100,000 valuation as that goes through, and that's across all homes on that valuation. There wasn't a cap on it. Other items here, I have Homeschool Connections. We actually have our admission is open right now for Homeschool Connections with that, which includes part-time, full-time online, part-time, full-time in person, or a blended learning model with that. We now have 2 part-time teachers with Homeschool Connections. It is now going to be a district-wide calendar for that, which means we'll be able to track the progress of these students directly tied to that. Within that, I am actually temporarily, I'll be the principal in charge of that as we kick this off for the first year with that. We have a coordinator, that is Taylor Olson, who will be being the coordinator of this program for Homeschool Connections across that, and a second teacher that'll be working out of the Valley area as we try to expand the number of students that we can bring back from homeschooling.
And it'll be identified in the general fund budget as a separate line item now, so it's
Yep.
all broken out.
Be like any other school. We have broken out in the budget. Other items, staff retirement and recognition banquet. And I want to make sure everybody gets this on their calendar as we continue to work on bringing this to our staff for the 4th year, where we recognize all retirees and recognition awards and different things that take place there. It's a great breakfast board. If there's roles that we can have you do, I know the committee has worked on that with Tanya, who's done, of course, as always, about 93% of the legwork for the stuff, so to make sure we have a great opportunity in the West Gymnasium that morning.
Except she has not secured a t-shirt cannon yet.
Yeah, we don't have a t-shirt cannon.
No. I got off of that committee because I didn't want to, like, it's so much work doing like the rubrics for nominating staff, and it's so tough. Like, it's tough. We've got such good staff. So I'm like, I'm not going to be on it this year. And then I got stuck doing a couple of rubrics anyway. So
what's going to take place is that's where we announce our teacher of the year for the entire district, and then district employee of the year also with that as our big keynotes with the retirements taking place. So please check your schedule, see if we can get 100% turnout by our board members for that event if possible. All right. That's all I have. Any questions for the superintendent that I can actually answer?
Just touch briefly on our meeting with the Department of Revenue.
Oh, yes. I actually have that pulled up over here. So today we finally got the meeting set with the Department of Revenue at 11 o'clock this morning, and that came out to talk to us about the possibility of working with Faith as a reorganization. We have a lot of questions about the revenue numbers based on mainly capital outlay as that source there. So we asked Department of Revenue to see if there are other options other than the current 2016-17 law we have to go back to. We're basically doing our entire evaluations based off 16-17 growth model, and we have some concerns with that, how those numbers work out. And we're seeking, here's what we're trying to seek to ensure any changes would benefit Faith 46-2, okay, benefits them for long term, but at the same time does not harm Meade 46-1 for their long term. With that, so we met with the business manager and superintendent from Faith, Brett and I did, and Department of Revenue, Wendy Semler, today for a little over 2 hours, going through all those numbers and trying to figure that out. We still have some questions. She's going back with some key questions to even ask legal support on to see if we can do certain things or not, because we need some clarification what's possible to see if that works. We have some concerns on how the revenue would shift may not help Faith enough and actually harm the Meade School District. So we have to make sure we have those numbers correct before we can move anything forward at all. That's where we're at. More to come when we find out from Department of Revenue. Thank you.
Question, do they give a timeline at all?
No, she said she's going back to speak to their legal department and check a few other things, and we do not have a specific timeline yet, but we'll be checking in a week or so to see how it's coming. It's a little bit slower for them now that legislative session's done.
12U, upcoming calendar events. April 15th, Homeschool Connections Program Orientation, 6 p.m. April 20th, Finance Committee Meeting, 4:30. April 27th, Building and Grounds Committee Meeting at 3:30. April 27th, Policy Committee Meeting, 5 p.m. April 28th, South Dakota DOE Road Trip Event. May 6th, Staff Professional Development, 2-hour late start. May 11th, School Board Meeting.
What's the DOE road trip event?
So they come around with a bunch of their staff. I host them for, I think it's 40 minutes in a presentation while we feed them about the Meade School District. Then they're going to go out to the high school and they're going to visit the CT machining area because we have one of the best machining shops you can find with our teacher out there. We're going to highlight that as a case. And then leave from here, they go to Lead Deadwood. I'm not sure where they're coming from, if it's Rapid or Douglas, where they're coming from before they come to us.
Is that a certain division of DOE or
It's a charter bus of them.
of like different divisions of
I thi-
DOE?
A Department of Education, I think it's different. I know we're supposed to host, I think, Tanya, correct, 18 people or 20 people? Or is it more than that? Yeah, something like that. And they come out. Not very long. So they've done this before in different areas, so we're on the list now. Lee, Deadwood, us, and I think actually Douglas might be the other one in the morning. We don't have them here very long.
Item 13, executive session. 13A, school board members will enter into executive session to discuss personnel SDCL 1-25-2.1 and employment negotiations SDCL 1-25-2.4. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to enter an executive session for personnel SDCL-1-25-2.1 and employment negotiations SDCL-1-25-2.4.
We have Brian with the motion,
Second.
Megan with the second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We will go into executive session at 8:20.
Short one.